Welcome to the San Ramon Valley Unified School District Board of Education meeting. We want to let the public know that we are video recording this meeting. The recording is being live streamed on the district's YouTube channel. So first we'll start with attendance. Rachel?
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rachel Hurd. I am the trustee for Area 5.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jesse Van Zee. I'm trustee for Area 1.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shelley Clark, and I represent Area 2.
And I'm Laura Brett. I represent Area 3, and Susanna Ordway is she's out this week on business travel. So next we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Can I have everyone stand, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you. So we start off with student recognition. So tonight's meeting is the last one of the 23-24 school year that will include student recognition. Tonight, we are celebrating the achievements of our high school athletic teams and student athletes from spring sports. We are so proud of the effort of all students who participate in a sport. However, the teams and individuals being recognized tonight participated at the highest possible competitive level in their respective sports. We are very grateful to their coaches for mentoring these athletes to reach their full potential. The athletic directors from each high school have shared with us the names and accomplishments of their teams, and at this time, I'm going to call students up by school and by sport. Each sport is represented by either individual athletes or by the team captains. While some of the athletes being recognized tonight are not able to join us since they are already enjoying their summer, I will announce everyone's names. Coaches, if you are here, please join us up front as well. And so we're going to start with the California High School men's tennis. The Cal High men's tennis team took the East Bay Athletic League, known as E-Ball, North Coast Section, or NCS, and California Interscholastic Federation, or CIF, Northern California titles this year, and were runners-up for the state championship. Representing the team are Ken Wijasakara, Jerry Sue, Albert Saeed, Ryan Wang, and coaches Manny Vasquez, Gerald Goulart, and Joyce Bonacera. So if you guys want to come up, we'll take a photo. Next, we have the seemingly undefeatable California high school stunt team. Once again, awesome. Stunt team E-Ball and NCS, and went on to take second place at state. Representing the team are captains Addison Crawford, Ashlyn Larson, Eva Perez Alonso, Charlotte Malen, Kayla Kasky, McKenna Reed, Claudia Ramirez, Maya Trinidad, Juliana Moratellaro, and coaches Bianca Lucatero, Nico Lucatero, Shayna Danielson, Zoe Mendoza, and Aiden Shields. All right, next up is the Cal High dive team. So Cal High diver Madeline DeSwanee had an outstanding year and took 17th place at CIF. She was coached by Cole Mellock. If you guys could come up if you're here, we could take some photos. Is she? Ooh, one of my favorites. Next up is Cal High women's lacrosse. The team had a solid season with an 11-5 overall record and made it to the quarterfinal round of NCS. Representing the team are Madeline Hoove, Trisha Shakar, Chase Weaver, Abby Kuntz, and coaches Tom and Madison Perry. All right, moving on to Doherty Valley. We have Doherty Valley men's swimming. After an outstanding season in the pool, Tim Wu also had a successful showing at state championships, earning third place in the 100 butterfly and fourth in the 200 IM. Congratulations to Tim and Coach Colleen Mays. And Doherty Valley track, we have Aaron Sajiraju capped off his track season with a 7th place finish in the 1600 meter at the CIF state championships. Aaron is coached by Lance Butler and Lauren Nakesso. All right, and we have Doherty Valley men's golf. Talented golfer Ray Zhang earned a spot in the NorCal championships. Ray is coached by Ken Williams. He's not here today, but we can still applaud for sure. And then we have Doherty Valley badminton. 2 successful badminton doubles teams fared well in state competition. Justin Khan and Shirians Bhagavatula, I'm sorry, earned a 2nd place finish, while Atharva Hulijal and Nahib Wang took home 4th. They are coached by Chris Yarus. Now we are at Monte Vista men's lacrosse. So the men's lacrosse team enjoyed a successful season and made it to the second round of NCS competition, where they were narrowly defeated. Representing the team are Mason Baker, Carson Mix, Morgan Lewis, Adler Munez, and Coach Casey Hawk. Are they here? Nope. Well, congratulations. And then we have Monte Vista women's swimming. Capping a very successful season, Monte Vista girls swimming finished fourth at state with some great performances that earned them third and fourth place in the 200 and 400 free relays. Representing the team are Ella Busquets and Eva Busquets. I'm assuming they're sisters or maybe twins. Molly Lind, Genesee Kwan, Zoe Vanetta, Addie Vonderall, and Coach Lauren Braswell. All right, and then Monte Vista women's track. The Mustangs were three-time defending E-ball champions and made it to the preliminaries at state. Representing the team are Natalie McGowan, Peyton Dolan, Isabel Moriyama, Kate Miller, Ava Ahern, and Coach Patrick Wales Dinan. Nope, and they're not here, but you can still congratulate them. All right, more lacrosse. San Ramon Valley High School men's and women's lacrosse. After a solid season and a 7-2 league record, the men's lacrosse team advanced to the second round of NCS. Representing the teams are captains Max Moran, Eli Volk, and coach Andrew Ortola. And then with an outstanding overall record of 21, 20-1, 21, that's awesome. The Lady Wolves were EVOL champions and also took first place at NCS. Amazing. Congratulations, you guys. Representing the team are captains Leslie Iorio, Caitlin Bray, and coaches Bill Forrester and Mike Iorio. I'm saying that name wrong. All right, San Ramon Valley men's and women's swimming. After great success and multiple events in the pool, the SRV men earned the title of fastest in the state after their 200-meter free relay team took first place at the CIF competition. Representing the team are Drew Arne, Nate Cheng, Kushan Harandi, Sawyer Joan, Chase King, Sam Siebold, Nick Tavani, and Evan Libertor with Coach Heather Johnson. Congratulations. And the Wolves women also ruled the pool and the CIF meet where the 200 free relay team narrowly missed taking first place and 200 medley relay also had a strong finish. Representing the team are Sasha Babushkina, Avery Knapp, Lexi Parkinson, Anna Sen, Miranda Stevenson, also coached by Heather Johnson. Maybe we can go back and then I think we'll do or should we do all of the? I pulled my page and thought I was done. I apologize. San Ramon Valley Track and Field. Many of the many of the SRV track and field athletes qualified for individual events at state involving pole vault, high jump, and 4x100 relay. One relay team even set a new school record. Representing the team are Holly Nodin, Sophia Gonzalez, Riley McMullen, Elise Doyle, Kyra Hansen, India Harvey, Isabella Guerrero, Hope Diekman, Emma Davidson, Caleb Please, and Coach Tracy McMullen. Congratulations to all of our talented SRVUSD athletes. We are so proud of you. And thank you to all of our coaches. Excellent job. All right, so next we have 6.1 staff recognition for our superintendent, John Malloy. So first I'd like to invite up California State Assembly member Rebecca Bauer Cahan, which is Assembly District 16, her field representative Donna Brown.
Very short. Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan wanted to present you with this resolution that goes over many of your wonderful accomplishments. But in particular, I wanted to share that she takes great pleasure in commending Dr. John Malloy for visionary leadership of San Ramon Valley Unified School District, bringing it to its current preeminence, and extends to him sincere best wishes for continued success in his future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, and then John, I'm probably going to have you stay out here. Because why not? Thank you, Donna. Next, we'd like to invite District Representative for the Tri-Valley, Matthew Bohr, from Senator Steve Glazer's office.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to join a celebration recognition for one of the Tri-Valley's most staunch advocates for our students, faculty, staff, and schools. And honestly, I think many in this room probably agree that that doesn't go far enough to describe you, Dr. John Malloy. Coming on in July 2020, I still can't wrap my brain around that. And during the midst of a historic pandemic, only just exemplified your commitment to student success, access to quality education, and their overall well-being. Although I'm sure that this goodbye is bittersweet, your contributions to this district will be well remembered, and I can't wait to hear about your future success in your next role. But on behalf of State Senator Steve Glazer, people of the 7th Senate District, and the recognition of your dedicated service to the San Ramon Valley Unified School District, I'd like to commend and congratulate you on your excellence, and thank you for your dedication to our community.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And then we have our own Alana Israel Samuels on behalf of the San Ramon Valley Education Foundation.
I should sit there.
Oh,
I'm here on behalf of Gary Alpert and Vanessa Beristain. On behalf of the San Ramon Valley Education Foundation, thank you for allowing the following to be shared tonight. Dr. John Malloy has been more than just a superintendent. He has been a beacon of inspiration and a true advocate for the efforts of the San Ramon Valley Education Foundation, and through us, our 35 school affiliates. From the moment Dr. Malloy stepped into his role, he quickly became a staunch supporter of the work we do at the Education Foundation. His unwavering belief in our mission has propelled us forward, and his support has been invaluable as we strive to make a difference in the lives of our students. We cannot overstate the generosity of Dr. Malloy's time. Despite his demanding schedule, he graciously made himself available to meet with us, both individually and as a group. His willingness to listen, to engage, and to offer guidance has been a testament to his commitment to our success. But perhaps what sets Dr. Malloy apart is his courage to confront the tough issues head on. He was never afraid to have candid conversations about the challenges facing our parent fundraising groups. His honesty and transparency have fostered a culture of openness and collaboration, paving the way for meaningful progress. As Dr. Malloy prepares to embark on the next chapter of his journey, we are left with a sense of gratitude and admiration. He has not only led with distinction, but has also left an indelible mark on our organization. A true measure of success is leaving an institution better than you found it, and Dr. Malloy has certainly achieved that. So as we express our deepest thanks and bid for farewell to Dr. Malloy, let us also celebrate his legacy and the incredible impact he has had on our community. We are eternally grateful for his leadership, his dedication, and his unwavering support. Dr. Malloy, thank you for everything you have done, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you, Vanessa Beristain, Executive Director, and Gary Alpert, Board President for the San Ramon Valley Education Foundation.
John, if you want to come sit down, we'll do the board steps. You don't have to stand there. So I'm gonna let Shelley present our thanks and our gift.
So that's a hard act to follow, but I'm gonna try. And I wrote it down. I hope I can get through without crying. You came to us during one of the most difficult and scary times in public education. You led us through that crisis with grace, empathy, and compassion, always taking the high road when some in our community did not. Your vision, your ability to clearly communicate and be fearless in your commitment to our students is inspiring. Under your leadership, we didn't just survive COVID. We were able to move forward to develop our strategic directions, which are our North Star now, and the learner profile, which helps us prepare our students for a successful future, all the while supporting our students with needed interventions and mental health services. On a personal note, I have learned so much from you. You have made me a better board member. And in my humble opinion, you are the best superintendent this district has ever had, and I've seen a few. You are definitely leaving us better and stronger than when you found us, and for that, I am eternally grateful. On behalf of the Board of Education, we want to present you with this plaque. It's made of glass and it's very heavy as a reminder of the heavy lift you had to do when you got here. Here is what it says. Leader, name, Dr. John Malloy, an experienced and trusted advisor who is willing to share their knowledge and experience to help others inspire and reach their goals. Someone who provides wise counsel and guidance. Someone who is hard to find, difficult to part with, and impossible to forget. One who is admired and appreciated. With gratitude, the San Ramon Valley Unified School District Board of Education. You are certainly that and so much more. Thank you and the best of luck in your new position. I know you will help a lot of people.
I'm sure we're all. I don't know, Rachel, if you.
So I'm not sure how much to add to the beautiful words that Shelley prepared, but I just want to say, John, that you challenged us. You challenged us as a community to get through those rough COVID times. And I just feel like you led us with such integrity. You were tough when you had to be tough. You were fair and you were steadfast on just what was right. And I will always be grateful. It seems like so long ago, but then when you start talking about it, it feels like it was just yesterday. But I also feel like I learned so much from you, whether it was talking about deep learning and all of that, what it meant, but then that it also meant these things, because you always were able to get to both and yes, and I think that was a key to your success. And as Shelley said, you've definitely left us better than you found us. We were a pretty good place to start with, but I feel like you just expanded our ideas of what we could be as a district and as individuals and as school sites. You challenged the Ed Foundation, you challenged PTA, you challenged local leaders. And for that, I will always be grateful, because that's how you keep growing. Thank you. I'll miss you.
You guys are gonna have nothing to say by the time we get to. John, when I talk to people in the community and they go, what's Dr. Malloy like? One of the things I commonly say is he is a brilliant executive. And what I mean by that is that you have such a good command on being proactive with the leadership of the district everywhere where you can. Where and even when we have to react to things, it's done in a proactive way where I feel like your team's already equipped with the knowledge and the resources that they need at hand to do it. And it's very rare to find somebody who is that organized and is that centered and has the ability to really, reach across and kind of touch people wherever they're at. One of the things you always said too is your goal was to not have people move to their corners. And I know that that's one thing that you always were trying to do. As we had conversations with each other as we worked with the community together. And I appreciate you for that. Thank you so much.
And if you want to hand me the poster, we also put together a little poster. You don't have to put it on your wall, but just kind of showing you with the kids, which as I was going through the pictures, it was very clear that was pure joy. And so we just wanted to give you this too, to remember us by, which I doubt you will forget the San Ramon Valley Unified School District. You've done so much and been such a big part of a transformative time in this district. I know to everyone's point, you came to a great district and you made it better. And I think that when I think about what education is, I think it's giving people the tools that they need to grow and to thrive. And I really believe that you've given all of us as board members, staff, students, even colleagues, even peers, other superintendents in the area, you've given us tools so that we've learned and we've grown, and now we get to take that and continue to make this district better and better with that knowledge and that mentorship that you given us. And I know that, Shelley and I were lucky, and Jesse, we're lucky to come into this board with you as the superintendent. And I believe that it made our jobs easier. It made our jobs, gave us the ability to actually do good work, because we've had your example to help us to be what I consider to be a very good governing body. And in a time when there's a lot of divisiveness, and that was in large part because of the mentorship that you gave us and the support that you gave us, not telling us what to do, but helping us, supporting us so that we could learn, and we had the tools to be able to be a great board. So anyway, thank you. We're going to miss you, and we can't wait to see what you can do. And you've given us a gift. I keep saying that you've given us a gift. So thank you. And I don't know if do we need another picture at this point, or we'll Do we want to go around the dais again? Would you like a picture of all of us with your picture? Okay. Take this one.
Need to take all three frames and
Thank you.
I decided since there's one more board meeting, I'm going to share my reflections next week. Thank you so much. That was really, moved me very deeply, and I really appreciate all of you very, very much.
We appreciate you. All right, so next we'll do reports of action taken in closed session. So the board voted 4-0 to approve a settlement agreement in OAH case number 2024-030315 in the amount of $104,500 for educational services and attorney's fees. This evening, the board made the following appointments in a 4-0 vote effective July 1st, 2024. Nicole Bergeland for the curriculum and instruction coordinator position. Charlie Litton, principal of San Ramon Valley High School. And the board approved the separation agreement for employee 7571 in a 4-0 vote. All right, so next we'll move to acceptance of minutes. May I have a motion to accept the minutes from the May 8th board workshop?
I motion to accept the minutes from the May 8th workshop.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
All right, next, I need a motion for, to accept the minutes for the May 14th, 2024 board meeting.
I move to approve that set of minutes.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
All right, so moving on to agenda approval. We would like to make the change to the order of the action agenda, item 11.4, public hearing for the proposed 24-25 district budget, and item 11.5, public hearing for the proposed 24-25 LCAP to be swapped. 11.4 will now be public hearing for the proposed 24-25 LCAP. 11.5 will now be public hearing for the proposed 24-25 district budget. May I have a motion to accept the revised agenda?
I motion to accept the revised agenda.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
Okay, moving on to consent agenda approval. So consent items are considered routine in nature and are approved by combining them into a single vote. Only a member of the board may request that a consent item be removed from the consent agenda to be considered and voted on separately. The public may comment on a consent item before the board approves the consent agenda. And I don't believe we have any cards for anything on the consent agenda. Oh, okay. All right. While you do that, does anyone on the board have any questions or concerns about anything?
Yeah, I'd like to pull out 13.5, if that's okay. Adoption of textbooks.
So, is it for 13.5? Yeah. Okay, so trustee Van Zee pulled that from the consent agenda. So we'll leave that. So bring it up and you can speak to it when it's on our regular agenda. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yep. Okay, so 13.5 is moved to 11.10, is that correct? Okay. All right. So with that change, does anyone?
I'll move approval with that change.
Second,
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Clark. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
All right. Okay, to make sure that everyone has a clear understanding of the ways that the community can engage during the public board meetings, I'd like to take a moment to review how public comment works. If you would like to make a comment during the meeting, you can find yellow comment cards at the meeting back by where Kit Bragg is back there. And if you have any questions, please speak to a staff member. You will have the opportunity to make a comment on agendized items when we come to that item. For comments on items not on the agenda, please wait until we come to non-agendized public comment on our agenda. Each speaker has a time limit of 3 minutes with a timer shown on the screen while you are speaking. The time limit will be enforced to ensure fairness. Please be aware that we may interrupt you and redirect you to the correct time to speak if your comment relates to a different agendized item or if it is not within our jurisdiction. I reserve the right as president to announce a last call for speaker card submissions. Please have your speaker card submitted when public comment begins for the agenda item you'd like to comment on, and I'll remind you of that at that point. The views expressed during public comment are those of the individual speaker. The absence of a response from the board or district staff does not imply agreement. The district believes in an inclusive, welcoming, and safe environment for its meetings for all of our community. Please be mindful that students are in the room and watching virtually. We are all here to support them and to support their educational experience. And thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your engagement and are glad that you're here. So next we have reports to the board, and the first to start off is our non-agendized public comment. So that's 10.1. So I'd already kind of explained how that works. We do have, it looks like we have 2 comments for public comment. Does anyone want to bring in any more? This is going to be our last chance to enter a non-agendized public comment. Okay, so first up is Sai Matan. Yeah, so you can come to the table, and then the timer will be on the screen, so you'll see it. And you have 3 minutes. It'll start out once you start speaking.
Yes. Well, good evening, everyone. I am from Iran. I'm Persian, so-called. And number one, I want to start from end why I'm here. Because I applied to become a teacher, substitute teacher in March. So it was end of March, and I've been working on it very, really actively to complete my file and become a substitute teacher. And I did everything. I have done basically recommendations, references, fingerprints, and CTC payments and everything. And after working for 2 months heavily, spending almost 120 hours of my time running around trying to complete the requirements, I'm basically being denied. And then I have complained, and then I've complained a few times, and then haven't got that far. That's why I'm here to ask for your support. Maybe the HR can change their mind and not to deny my application, because I'm here as an engineer. I have a master's in physics and electrical engineering. I've been working in the telecommunication field for almost 50 years. And then I have a very good understanding of math and science. And I like to basically contribute that to new students and fresh brains up to date, especially this area. So I have very high passion for teaching. About 9 years ago, I went to Monte Vista High School, asking to become a volunteer, basically. Ms. Janet Teravano, she was the principal. She stood up and shook my hand and sent me over here to become a substitute teacher. She said, well, you have to work for free, get something. So I came here and then basically I stayed there for a year and a half. Mr. Evan Powell was vice principal at the time, and he became summer principal, summer school. And then he picked me to teach a course summertime, and it was very successful. And he realized my passion for teaching, and I am here for that. And it's unfortunate that I'm being denied. And I'd like to somehow the board and basically everybody over here to consider this, and then maybe have the HR to change their mind and give me the offer. That's the reason I'm here. And the main reason, basically, I came to this country was a person called Steve Boscovich, who came to Iran about 120 years ago. And then he basically sacrificed his life for the freedom of Iran. And because there was a fight between the dictator king and then the people,
Thank you, Sai.
then
Yeah.
sacrificed himself. So
Thank you.
that
You-
brought me to United States, and Mr. Avano and Mr. Powell brought me to.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, next up is Mike Garata.
Yesterday's East Bay Times reported on the ethnic studies courses barging into California public schools, noting that there are two competing versions of such courses: critical or liberated ethnic studies on one hand, and constructive ethnic studies on the other. As Lena Kaplan, co-founder of the Alliance for Constructive Ethnic Studies, observes, the difference between the two courses comes down to politics. The constructive model empowers students to dream big and rise to challenges. It works to build intergroup understanding and a range of political perspectives on solving problems. In contrast, the so-called liberated model focuses on power structures, repression, imperialism, and colonization, and demands student activism assignments. This being SRVUSD, effectively a wholly owned subsidiary of the radical CTA and NEA teacher unions, the focus here is on that version of ethnic studies. Among other things, SRVUSD's course, quote, examines the complexities of power, privilege, and agency in history and modern-day socio-political systems through the lenses of race, ethnicity, gender, class, ability, and religion. Students will think deeply about intersectional identities and bias, and students will, quote, learn about liberatory movements and culminate with a student-designed action project that promotes collective empowerment. On June 5th, Parents Defending Education, a national group, published a copy of the 18-page syllabus utilized 3 years ago to rationalize your radical ethnic studies program. The course overview expects students to challenge and transform perpetual systems of oppression. Unit 1 mentions using the Courageous Conversations Compass from one of your expensive outside consulting outfits to, quote, examine the presence and role of whiteness, unquote. Unit 2 is all about intersectionality, identity, bias, and narratives. Unit 3 is about hegemony, power, privilege, positionality, patriarchy, sexism, and misogyny. As a sidebar, one of your adopted textbooks, stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, recommends the vile misogyny of Straight Outta Compton as a source of change and empowerment. 3 more units round out this course with such topics as reparations and Saul Alinsky-like community organizing. 7 pages show dozens of recommended teacher and student materials, then follow, heavily involving critical race theory, socialism, and DEI, which in reality stands for division, exclusion, and indoctrination. 3 of the recommended references are shown in the sign. The last of these, This Book is Anti-Racist, is effectively an overtly racist caricature of anti-racism. It capitalizes every race but white, and the author says that being racist against white people is not a thing. So it's okay for her to, quote, have a prejudice against white people. Once again, SRVUSD schools are an attitudinal and moral danger to students. Parents of sufficient means will do well to help their kids escape these schools.
Thank you, Mike. All right, so now we're moving on to Association President's Report 10.3. Tammy Castelluccio with the CSEA.
Coming up so early tonight. That usually doesn't happen. This is exciting. Anyway, I'm Tammy Castelluccio, CSEA president. I would like to again thank Dr. Malloy for all he has done as superintendent in this district for our classified employees in our district. You will be missed. I would also like to congratulate our new student athletes, for a job well done. I would also like to thank our classified employees that finished out the year strong in support of all of our students. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the CSEA classified employees that are still working. We have our district office staff that works through the summer, our service center staff, school staff, school site staff that works a few weeks into June, our paraeducators and classified staff working for summer school, and we have child nutrition employees providing food for summer school as well. So I'd like to thank them. And I'm very excited that the board is taking action tonight with our new student board member. Student voice has become so important in our district, and we are welcoming our new student board member. Looking forward to seeing the work that he will do this year, and hope everyone has a great summer. Thanks.
Thank you, Tammy. Next up is Laura Finko with Serbia.
Aloha, everyone. Happy Pride. I'd like to start this evening, as I always do, with a land acknowledgement, remembering that this is the land of the Ohlone Nation. And as we meet here today, it is only because of their caretaking of this land that we are able to be here this evening. We should acknowledge that, respect that in the way that we behave and in how we honor each other. It is Pride Month. And in Indigenous nations, being two-spirited is seen as being esteemed and honored with high positions of the tribe. I'd love to talk about that this evening. I'd also love to talk about the budget, which I know we'll hear a little bit about later on, and how the reductions and how the state has funds public education, how that impacts our teachers and our students, especially with not being able to pass measures E and F, what the position that puts us in financially, and the responsibility that we have to ensure that our students and our educators have the resources and supports, that we don't have this negatively impact them as much as it might, even though we are seeing some of the limited resources already having some pains, in that as we continue to move through this financial period, that we realize just how reductions affect our kids. I'd also would love to talk tonight about negotiations, because believe it or not, Servia and management isn't done yet. Sorry, Melanie. We're still working on an MOU for our alt ed, something that you would think would be fairly easy, particularly since we did break into subcommittee to see if we couldn't come to at least a conceptual agreement. But we're having difficulty in terms of agreeing on what is the best teaching environments for our alt ed experiences. We're also still working on Bell Schedules MOU and Student Support MOU. And one of our highest priorities this year, our safety article. We're still working on that. As we entered this new era of education, it's not your education that all of you, the world that you were in as students and as educators, we're not there anymore. This is a new era, and it's different and it's hard. And we need to make sure that when we look at our safety article, we're not just talking about having functional heat and air conditioning and toilets. We have to ensure that our educators in our classrooms and in our school campuses are protected from the variety of ways that education is being, for lack of a better word, assaulted today, including in social media. So as much as I want to talk all about that, I'm not going to. Dr. Malloy, you joined our district amidst a global pandemic, an unforeseen challenge at your appointment, yet you adeptly steered our course, ensuring the safety and security of all of our students and staff, reducing the impact to the greatest extent possible. Despite a tumultuous start, your leadership has been transformative. Your extensive background in educational leadership was a boon for our district. With your guidance, we realigned our strategic plan and mission, focusing on critical areas such as guidance and social emotional learning. Your approach to building bridges and fostering collaboration over conflict was commendable. Though we faced criticism, our shared goal remained clear: to provide the best for our students. Your partnership on this journey is deeply appreciated. The respect you've earned from the SRVUSD community, including faculty and students, is a testament to your dedication. Our recognition as pioneers in education is just one of many accolades, but equally important are the countless acts of kindness and care that may never be publicly acknowledged, but are cherished by those you've touched. Your leadership has set a new standard for professional and educational excellence, leaving a legacy for future leaders to aspire to. Your commitment to hard work, inclusivity, and excellence has made a lasting positive impact on our community. Thank you for your service. And as you embark on your next chapter, know that your efforts here were truly significant. It wasn't an easy path, but there's no one else that I would have preferred to walk it with. Finally, I'm grateful for your comprehension of the role I had to fulfill and the patience and understanding you showed as we tackled challenging issues internally as well as externally. Few leaders generally understand the intricacies behind the scenes. My deepest thanks to you. I wish you happiness in your new position and trust you will impart your mentee with that labor and management can collaborate harmoniously. Indeed, when we unite in our efforts rather than oppose each other, our students emerge as the ultimate winners. You've always recognized that truth. Thank you. I do have something for you, but please open it when you get home.
Thank you, Laura. All right, next up is 10.3 Superintendent's Report.
And as I promised earlier, I'm going to be brief tonight and I'm going to share a little bit more next week. But I did want to take this opportunity just because I always have the position on the agenda where I follow our leaders in our labor groups and of course our student trustee, and we're going to get to welcome our new student trustee in a minute. But I just want to take a moment to emphasize what we just heard Laura share, and certainly Tammy has shared this as well, that labor relations can be tricky. But when you stay focused on what's most important, which is our students, and we say that with absolute sincerity, and understand that we have different roles to play in this community, but still needing to be as connected as possible, as appropriately as that can be. When the paradigm is oftentimes pushing us towards adversarial dynamics. Just, it's not anything personal. It's just, and it's bigger than San Ramon. It's just that sometimes can be the paradigm. And here in the 4 years that I've been here working specifically with Laura and Tammy and Carrie and their teams, we've made a conscious choice not to do that. And I'm grateful for that because you can't do that alone. And as I've done this work for a considerable amount of time, it's so easy to fall back into the old paradigms because that's kind of how it's all programmed to be. And the us, them prevails. And it's unfortunate because I've never seen anyone be served effectively by it. So because I always have this spot of getting to follow Laura and Tammy every month, I want to offer my public thanks to you because our relationship is what it is because we do it together. I want to acknowledge our team led by Melanie. And I know that though we hear from Laura and Tammy each month, there's a whole team with them that is part of this process. And I know that when we started together, you couldn't start in a tougher time, but we found that stride quickly And I know as a board, you don't take that for granted. And I'm grateful for the direction you provided that gave our cabinet team the space to build the relationships the way they've been built. Because if you were actually directing us to be different, no matter what I personally felt, we follow our board's direction. But your direction, our cabinet's response, our relationships with our partners, I do believe have served our students and will continue to serve our students very well. So that'll be my message for tonight, and I'll have more to share next week.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. All right, so next we'll move on to action items. So 11.1, the board to take action to seat our new student board member. So after a lengthy process that included feeder patterns, the student bodies voting on the feeder pattern nominations, and then those folks that were nominated then presented to Student Senate, and then they voted on those and distilled that down to a handful who then came for interview with Shelley and myself, Dr. Malloy, Hong Nguyen, and Kit Bragg. And after careful consideration, it was in the end they were all great candidates, but the choice that we made was an excellent one, which is I would like to recommend to the board that we seat Travis Hodges as our next student board member for the 24-25 academic year. Does anyone have any comments, or we will take action? Does anyone have any comments or questions? No?
No, we're just very happy to have you, and you were an outstanding candidate. All of our students were amazing, but you definitely stood out. And I can't wait to see what you're going to do this next coming year and what you're going to bring to us, because our student board members have been so valuable, especially in our decision making and my decision making as a board member. And I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, and I also want to mention that Travis has done some work he had applied also last year and interviewed last year, and as a rising junior, and has had some experience on the state level with the PTA board, I believe, and is very much an advocate with legislation and has lots of great ideas, and we're really excited to have you on the board. You're going to bring in a perspective that's, as Anya and Ronit did before you, that's incredibly invaluable for us. So go ahead, Rachel.
Welcome. I had the pleasure of meeting you at the California State PTA Convention, and I remember you really impressed me then. So I'm so excited I get to sit next to you. Welcome.
We do need a motion to take action to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the seating of the new student board member.
I'll second that.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
All right, let's do a quick picture. Let's do a quick picture. Welcome, Travis. We're happy to have you. All right, so next we'll move on to 11.2, consideration of approval of the SRVUSD Special Education Local Plan Area, SELPA, local plan, annual service plan, and annual budget plan for 24-25. So that's Linda Rowley-Tom.
Good evening, trustees. I come with our updated local plan for special education that meets the requirements set forth by the California Department of Education for us as a single district SELPA, along with our annual budget plan and annual services plan for the 24-25 school year. The local plan will stay, section B, which talks about all of the assurances we meet, both federal and state assurances to follow California Education Code and the federal IDEA and the California Code of Federal Regulations as they relate to students with disabilities. That will stay in place for the next 3 years. So we will be back here in 2027 with another section B of the local plan. The reason that we do have this on action this evening is that we have made one adjustment to our annual budget plan, and that was a decrease in our total contribution. And that decrease is the result of a clerical error that we found in the salary projections upload in the QSS system, as well as a analysis that we did to look at current Contra Costa County Office of Education placements of students with disabilities, as well as non-public school placements. So we were able to decrease that amount, which is why you have a revised version in front of you that is different than what we brought in May.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? No? Nope. And we don't have public comment for this. So I need a motion to approve item 11.2.
I'll move approval of our SELPA 3-year plan.
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Student Board Member Hodges?
Aye.
Board Member Hurd?
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee?
Aye.
Board Member Clark?
Aye.
Board Member Bratt?
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
Great, thank you, Linda. All right, next we have 11.3, consideration of approval of revision to Board Policy 6161.1, selection and evaluation of instructional materials. And I believe that is Debbie Pettish.
Good evening, President Bratt and fellow board members. I'm here today to discuss some proposed changes to policy 6161.1, selection and evaluation of instructional materials. And essentially these changes fall into 2 categories. One is essentially a decision on which books would come forward for approval. And we did discuss this at a board workshop earlier this semester, as well as at the last board meeting. So the updated language specifies that a textbook or novel must receive approval from the board when it is used in a class setting where all students are provided with a copy and expected to read it, whether as a class, in groups, or independently. The second change that we're bringing forward with regard to policy 6161.1 has to do with incorporation of some language on supplementary resources specifically. And essentially to highlight that language, it's that any supplementary resource, and of course a supplementary resource we're defining as something that has not been officially approved by the board. But all supplementary resources should be directly related to a course of study. So that of course means that it is being used to achieve a particular component of the strategic direction, or of course the state of California standards. It will be age appropriate and appropriate also for the maturity level of the students who are using it. And that any employee who is using a supplementary resource shall preview the material to determine whether in their professional judgment it is appropriate for the grade level being taught. And again, is consistent with the district's criteria for the selection of resources. Thank you.
Great. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I just had a couple things. So one, thank you for all the work that you put in on it. I know that I was a little bit of a stickler on a few things, but I do appreciate the thought of the language. I did have one question. One of the things that we were discussing as we were talking about a review of this policy is when we were talking about 10+ copies and kind of going away with that, is where does the subject of a read aloud book in kind of like the younger years fall into this policy? Because it wouldn't necessarily be a book everybody's expected to read on their own behalf or even provided a copy, but I just didn't quite see where that fit into the policy.
Thank you so much for that question. So technically a read aloud, so of course a read aloud could be used in middle and high school, but usually they're used at the elementary level. Sometimes they're planned and sometimes it's not. The class potentially is interested in a particular subject, so the teacher either grabs that book off their shelf, reads it aloud to the students, or may find a book in the library or elsewhere to read to students. So technically that, according to the policy, changes the way that they are currently written would not have to be board approved. And the rationale for that is essentially anytime there's a read aloud, by the nature of a read aloud, the teacher is there to be able to support the students in processing the information that's in that book. They can answer any questions. A read aloud, only the teacher typically has that read aloud, right? The students don't have it to take home or to read on their own at any given time. And also when I received input from staff, principals and elementary teachers in particular, they did argue that it would really inhibit their teaching in many ways,
Yeah.
because it does take a long time often for something to get board approved. So if the class becomes really interested in something or something really exciting happens in the news and it takes maybe a 2-month turnaround to get that book approved, it really would potentially squash student engagement and the ability of teachers to pick the books that they feel students are most interested in listening to.
Yeah. And I do understand that, like from that component. And I think, 99.9% of the time it's going to be universally accepted and people are going to be fine with that. I think one of the concerns that I had that, some parents have come to me with before is, what do you do with, because even at some elementary schools, there's, principal will select a book and read it aloud to all the classes or most of the classes or something like that. So my two kind of like components of what I was hoping for in an overall policy, and we did have some discussions on maybe these live in separate policies, is the notification component. I get it that a second grade teacher can't be like, oh, I was interested in reading to them about electricity or something like that. So, and it's not a board approved book, it's just a simple straightforward kids book. But when there are maybe more controversial subjects that are approached on the communication piece of, all the way from primary to secondary and, all the way up through high school, kind of that notification of, is it on a syllabus? Is there kind of like foreknowledge that is discoverable by a parent should they wish to choose to see that? Do we have any sort of plan in the works as far as maybe looking at like syllabus requirement language or anything like that would address maybe the communication piece?
At this point, we took it as far as we could take it without a full negotiation process for work impacts. What this policy emphasizes is that the teacher has a professional responsibility outlined in the way you see it. It also speaks to our engagement of parents should they have concerns. But the concerns don't just have to be in reaction to something. The concerns can be in developing that relationship with the teacher at the beginning of a year to talk about who their child is, who their family is, and so forth. And so that's as far as we can go at this point. And that's where, when we were working with you in previous sessions, we're bringing you the best thinking that can happen at this time. If the board's direction is that you'd like to see anything else, those would have impacts such as negotiations. We would take that direction, and into the new school year that would be followed. But this is what we can bring based upon all the parameters that you've shared previously.
Travis, did you want to add anything? I know it looked like you had.
Nothing really much to add on this, other than that I really do agree that this is something like, again, with the primary education, right? You may not want to have to pre-approve books. In the case that younger students, as you were talking about the electricity example, spontaneous learning is important. And I do think it might be something to look into more just on controversial topics, because we don't want parents getting upset, and making sure that that classroom dynamic is protected, especially with all of our educational stakeholders who we really value. But I do understand where you're coming from, and Dr. Malloy, to your point, we have gone, I think, as far as we can go with this. So that's really all I have to say.
Thank you.
So I read over the other policy and I've looked at this policy and I feel like at this point that we need to respect the professionalism of our teachers and trust them to make good judgments on what they provide to our students. There is a remedy if there is a complaint or there's an issue with a student in a particular book, there's a way to handle it in this policy. I think I'm not going to handcuff our teachers to a policy that makes them not be able to spontaneously educate our students and give them the material that they feel that they need in any given subject. And as I said, if anybody has a problem with any of the things that are being read or whatever, there's a way for them to deal with that. And they can talk to their teacher and there's a whole statute for them to go ahead and move forward. So at this point, for me, I would call for a vote on this particular policy at this point, because I feel like we have taken it as far as we can without encroaching on our educators and the quality of the education that our students are going to get.
And President Brad, if I can just offer one other thought that I don't know if we've emphasized enough. The professional rubric and expectation that's outlined here. When it comes to our attention that we need to deal with it, we have a process to deal with it. You won't necessarily hear about it because it's a personnel matter that we're not going to discuss publicly. But when someone chooses curriculum resources that we would suggest do not follow that expectation, there's a process that we follow. Now, I want to be very clear. It's used very, very seldom in SRVUSD. So if you as board members continue to hear from parents, the absolutely most important message is, please be sure they're talking to their school staff, because if they're not, then we can never get to a better place. Because what I find our school staff is second to none about is when they know that there are concerns, they lean into those. But if they don't know that the concerns exist, they can't even begin to have the conversation. But I did want to say that it's not just we write this in a policy and then it sits on a shelf. If it comes to our attention that inappropriate materials have been chosen, and sometimes they've even been referred to in this boardroom, I've never commented because I'm not allowed. I promise you we deal with that with the appropriate structures that are in place.
We do have public comment. I don't know, Rachel, if you first want to
We can do
speak
the
now.
public
Okay. All right. Okay. So we have one public comment. This is the last call for public comment. So we have Mike Arata.
Your policy 6161.1 says that the board shall adopt instructional materials based on a determination that such materials are an effective learning resource to help students achieve grade level competency. Further, that such materials shall be aligned with the district's strategic directions and goals, curriculum objectives, and academic standards. Additionally, and again quoting from 6161.1, supplementary instructional materials shall be directly related to the course of study in which they are being used and shall be appropriate for the age and maturity level of students. You continue to say that per board policy 1312.2, you are sensitive to the needs of our parents and community and invite individuals with concerns to initiate conversations with their students, or with their child's teacher concerning instructional materials. You then encourage parents and other community members who don't receive satisfactory responses from teachers to proceed upstream as needed to principals, then the superintendent, and finally to your board itself. But the reality is that by not acting yourself to remove the most vile pornography, including Let's Talk About It and American Psycho, you have effectively disqualified yourselves as reasonable arbiters of classroom and school library appropriateness. Your board policy 4219.24 prohibits transmitting or displaying porn to students. But the sign shows 90 of the pornographic books in your high school libraries. And now you're increasingly introducing such material to classrooms. In reality, your standard is functionally equivalent to that of the corrupted American Library Association, which itself states explicitly that there should be no age or content limits whatsoever for library materials. So no matter how profane or depraved the material in question may be and has been, apparently your board majority and the ones which have preceded you, again in thrall to the SRVUSD, CTA, and NEA teacher unions for the last 24 years at least, no matter how profane or depraved the material submitted for adjudication, none of it has been rejected. If you're not going to honor such policies in reality as 6161.1 and 1312.1 and 4219.24 for that matter, you should stop trying to deceive parents and other taxpayers and remove such cosmetic policies because they're not doing anything. You're not paying any attention to them. So far as I know, you've never rejected any book or other material from classroom use, including some R-rated that should have been X-rated films. And as before, since SRVUSD schools represent an attitudinal and moral danger to students, concerned and responsible parents of sufficient means should remove their children from these schools, adding thereby to the already steep enrollment decline.
Thank you, Mike. Rachel, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment Debbie and her team and I'm sure all the other staff that were involved in this because we had several meetings and a workshop where we discussed all of this and a lot of different angles. And I think what we ended up with is an improved policy. I think getting rid of the 11 and clarifying which kind of things we mean as instructional materials and which are supplemental. I think you nailed it and I'm glad. If there's a need to discuss this further, we'll discuss it further. But like John said, it doesn't come up very often. And I really like how it closes with the invitation to partner with your teacher. Because that, I remember when I was even offering that we need to do something is we don't want to look like we don't want to partner with families. And so families that have concerns about books as the school year starts have an invitation to have a conversation. And we don't have to wait till we get to the point where you're protesting a book or you're, going through the complaint process. You can proactively say, these are the things I'm concerned about. I'm also assuming that with regard to read alouds that we've already approved, they're approved. And so those are the things that are often on what people might consider more sensitive subjects. And we'll probably continue to do those. But the one example you brought up, Deb, when you were talking about the teacher needing to be fluid and being able to act in the moment, is the other piece of when you have something happen in the classroom, some skirmish between two students. If there's a book that can get to the heart of the conflict in a very teachable way, I would never want to take away the teacher's opportunity for that teachable moment. But I really appreciate all the people that weighed in from the public, from staff about this topic, because I think we moved it along and we ended up in a better place. Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that we had a really robust workshop where we talked about a lot of things as a board. We gathered information from you. Staff did a lot of research to present all of that. We've had opportunities in multiple board meetings, not just the last one, to talk to council to answer that question. What is porn? How does that exist? Are these books that some folks call that? Are they really that? Those types of things. So we've had these conversations. We've done our due diligence. And I'm really happy with where we've landed. I feel like we've been able to create a framework that allows for an involvement from a parent standpoint without it being on the burden of staff to be able to ensure and then limit how they can teach. And I think it's important for us to remember that, and read alouds is a good example, that it's a teacher or a principal who is an educator reading this book to the students and talking about it and teaching them about the book. It's not just a child picking up a book, a small child picking up a book about a subject that they know nothing about that might be scary to them and reading it themselves, right? There's an educational component around that and the expertise of our teachers being able to to educate around those topics that sometimes are hard and are, I think it's important for our kids to be able to have those experiences in educational settings to be able to learn how to learn. And so this provides that. So anyway, but we've talked about all this many times. We've gone around and around. So I mean, I agree with Shelley that I think it's time for us to put it to a vote.
I'll say one last piece on it, just to echo everything that was said is, I don't want to ever let the pursuit of the perfect get in the way of good. And to Rachel's point, I see it as a much improved policy. I think that we had very robust debate, and even though we didn't all agree on everything, I think what you did see is a board who were in different spots. We came together, we landed on something that was good. And, and I know that that tension has to exist in the classroom. I wouldn't want to move on one side of saying, hey, everything's approved, and then limit on the other side. And so I think that just has to be held in a healthy balance. And then hopefully that, that the teachers will understand the students and the parents and the families in their classroom when addressing those sensitive topics, because it becomes difficult as a board member when the bell has been rung, you can't unring the bell, and you're like, okay, now we're acting reactionary. But again, there's so many instances where that never happens. And we as board members tend to just hear about the ones where it goes wrong. So, and that's something I can understand as well. So.
Great.
somebody wanna-
Great. Can I get a motion?
Shelley already made a motion.
I would like to make a motion to adopt the revised,
Second, oops, I had my mic on. I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Roll call vote. Student Board Member Hodges.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
aye.
Board Member Bratton.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
All right, great. Thank you. And thank you, Debbie, and everyone on your staff and all the teachers and all the parents and students and everyone. So many in our community had a voice in this. And I think that shows, the shared leadership in our community. So I appreciate everyone and all the conversations that we've had with this. So thank you. All right, so next we will move to 11.4, public hearing for the proposed 24-25 local control accountability plan. So I need to gavel in to a public hearing, and then there'll be a presentation from John Campipiano.
Hello, trustees. Welcome to our new trustee. It's amazing having a student here, and that's something we'll bring up. And this is Executive Director Evan Miller, who will be sharing the presentation with us. And so we will keep this as brief as possible, but we'll be available to answer any questions, as it has a bit of a new look this year in terms of the LCAP. So the thing that, Dr. Molloy has received many great accolades tonight, and from an LCAP purpose, he has been a maverick at the county level, because when we started, if any of you was around, we had 9-10 goals. And he was very frustrated when he looked at our strategic directions. So what we did, which we're very pleased of, and we've shared, is our strategic directions match directly: deep learning innovation, equity, and social emotional well-being. Those are our 3 LCAP goals. And then this iteration, we've simplified it even more, where our actions are primarily focused on our unduplicated students, which Mr. Miller will talk about in a minute. So thank you for bringing that in. We're much more concise. I think it connects more effectively, and we've made good progress. LCAP, for those that don't know, it's a 3-year plan that annually describes the goals, actions, services, and expenditures to support positive support and family outcomes. And really, this is the slide I want to spend a few minutes on before passing it to Evan Miller. We have had great community partnership. And when we presented the draft of this to the county, just to look at different elements, and then we bring it here tonight, we get feedback from you and community members, and then we come back next week. Consult educational partners. They were so impressed with the makeup of our group. We had 20+ students signed up, and usually we had in the high teens that would come to these meetings from 5:30 to 7 to give input. We had 20+ parents. We had SRVUSD leadership with Melinda Daly and Laura Finko at every meeting. CSEA leadership, Tammy Castelluccio, at every meeting. Our Ed Fund Executive Director Vanessa Berenstein was at every meeting. Board members Clark and Bratt, thank you for joining us. District and site admin. We had very large input, and some of my colleagues in other districts locally, they don't get hardly anyone to go to those meetings. So it's so impressive to have that. And then tonight, if you pop over to April, June, this is the night when we present the public hearing to solicit recommendations and comments from you, from members of our community, to the proposed LCAP that we are presenting tonight. So to kick us off, we'll turn it over to Mr. Miller to discuss the LCFF parent budget overview.
Thank you, Mr. Campopiano. Good evening. So the first few pages of the LCAP are the budget overview for parents. This is a more recent addition to the LCAP template, but the idea is it provides some additional budget transparency and then also helps the board and members of the public tie the LCAP to the budget. So it's very high level, but demonstrates that relationship between LCAP and budget. It has basically three pictures that it shows: the district's revenues for the upcoming year, expenditures that are included in the LCAP, and then a look back at the prior year increase and improved services. Before we jump into those, wanted to back up a little bit about LCF and talk about LCFF LCAP supplemental funds. They are, so our supplemental funds, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in budget, but the current year LCAP mostly describes how the district plans to use its supplemental dollars. They are generated by these three groups of students that we see here, because there is an equity component to LCFF, and the state has determined that these students require additional support and funding. It's important to note that those three percentages of our student groups from last year don't total up to the total unduplicated percentage, and that's because the definition of unduplicated is that you only count each student one time. So if a student falls into two of those categories, we would still only count them once. In any case, that 10.91% unduplicated, we project will generate a little bit less than $7 million in supplemental funds for the upcoming year, and those are the bulk of the funds that we will see described in the LCAP. So on to the budget overview for parents. The first slide is projected revenue. The pie chart on the left, the bigger one, shows total revenue for the entire district. It is about $442 million overall. The biggest slice of that are our LCFF funds, about $331 million. The pie chart on the right shows of that $331 million, how much is general base grant LCFF, and then that small little slice that are generated by our unduplicated students, the supplemental portion, a little less than $7 million. The next slide is expenditures. So this shows overall general fund budgeted expenditures for the upcoming year, about $464 million. And then the expenditures that are described in the LCAP. So as Mr. Campopiano mentioned, we have slimmed it down and really only mostly describe the supplemental actions. And so that's a little bit over $7 million. We do have a couple other actions in there that are not supplemental, but for the most part supplemental. We think this gives us a better idea of how we actually use those funds. They're not, lost amongst a whole bunch of different actions. But also it keeps up, our largest expenditure is personnel, over 85% of expenditures. And we don't know that it does the public any service to describe classroom teachers or classified staff in the LCAP. And then finally, the last chart is a look back at our prior year supplemental services. So the budgeted expenditures, that's how much were in the LCAP last year for students, for increased improved services for students, and then our estimated actuals in the green below. So it's about $122,000 difference, I think, 1.45%. I think it's also important to note that we spent more than we received in LCAP supplemental funds last year. And those are the three main parts of budget overview for parents.
Okay, and I'm going to go quickly now, and then we can answer questions. My team gets tired of me because I really love this stuff and it's not met with that same excitement sometimes from my colleagues, and we tease each other for it. But the reason I love it is because this LCAP, we're talking about with a large group of community educational partners, $7 million to the students with highest needs in our district. And to me, that's very exciting. And so when we talk about our English learners or foster homeless youth, low income students, when we are sitting there discussing it, I've seen such growth in our district where we are high achieving. Most people would kill to have our test data, et cetera. But our committee is focused on what else can we do to support our English learners. And we've heard from Coordinator Deanna Zapia this year on the English learner progress that we've been making, the reclassification rate. So that stuff's exciting. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. This is all just information about what must be included in the LCAP. We must have a metric that shares the credentialing of our teachers and our facilities being in good repair. And you will find that in our 79-page LCAP that you can find on our website. That's anyone that's here or watching online to review this week. It's all linked on our website. We must implement state standards, which there's many meetings in this room where we discuss state standards and really making sure, especially our English language development standards, are being taught with fidelity in an integrated designated way, which we've heard in the past. We must have actions and metrics that discuss parent involvement. And you know how much this district, you know, when Dr. Molloy came in, how engaged we got with Thought Exchange and other opportunities to get parent involvement. And we're very proud of the work that we've gotten to get students. We did not have a student board member prior to Dr. Molloy. That was the beginning of that. We might have before I was here, but in the recent iteration, having student, that's so important. And Student Senate is new. That's all part of getting that student voice. Pupil achievement, as we all know, the data will show we are AP success as a district. We have a number of years where we've met that. We have our test scores, A to G completion. We must have actions that address those. This one, very important. This year across our country, chronic absenteeism is very high. We have a specific action around chronic absenteeism is required by the state of California because we have 14 different schools that have chronic absenteeism data. We believe those numbers will be going down, but we'll be monitoring that for a 3-year period of time. So we have a baseline data on what those rates are. We have very low dropout rates at the high school level, 0% dropout rate at the middle school. We have 97+% graduation rate that we hope to get to 100% in over the next 3 years. School climate measured by California Healthy Kids Survey and our suspension data, expulsion data, that is included in the LCAP. Course access to courses that are CTE based that meet all of the state standards in the LCAP. And finally, other pupils' outcomes. So where we land is this LCAP, 79 pages, we have our 3 goals, which I mentioned from our strategic directions, which covers and drives this district. And then we have actions that support those, primarily focused on unduplicated students. And so you'll see many actions under those to support English learners, low-income students, with social workers, but it's very detailed. So I encourage anyone in our community to review that. Also on the website, we have a review of our previous LCAP that shows the baseline data that we started with 3 years ago and where we landed this year. We have a local indicator self-reflection that is an internal document that the county does not approve, but we reflect on our progress. And then we have a federal addendum. So all of these are on our website to be reviewed. We're soliciting recommendations, answering questions over the course of this week so we can bring an update to you next week at our board meeting. So at that, I will pause and I will answer any specific questions that you have.
Does anyone have any questions?
You have a question? So in kind of reviewing the previous LCAP, the 2019 through current, and then we're looking at the future looking 3-year LCAP, in kind of reviewing, obviously the pandemic hit in the middle there, and you can see some of the baseline goals with the end goal and, you know, on multiple things. Other than the pandemic though, what sort of information did you find for like kind of root cause analysis to instruct yourself to go, how do we set these goals maybe differently or maybe more appropriately for where we want to see this in 3 years? I'm just curious about the approach for the team.
Thank you so much, Trustee Van Zee. And for those that are not as familiar with that, we set a baseline data point where we are, for example, on English learner reclassification, where we were in 2019. And then we have a desired goal. Fortunately, in our audience, we have our Director of Assessment and Research, Kit Bragg, who was at us at every LCAP meeting. So where we're better now is we've added Mr. Bragg, and we're using the 5x5 to give us a more achievable desired outcome.
Yeah.
So for some of these, a lot of our districts were just throwing in these numbers and then learning loss occurred.
Yeah.
So the primary is a couple things. One, we didn't feel like we had properly evaluated where the desired outcome would be, even without, of course, we didn't know about COVID.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But we didn't look at the data properly. So meaning we would throw things out in committee, let's improve by 4%. When Kit Bragg presented our last LCAP meeting, to go up 0.5% or 1% would jump us to an entire another category.
Yeah.
So we were more realistic in that. So you will see desired outcomes that were not met. And for every one of those, we have to give an explanation why they were ineffective. Now, here's the challenge that I have is, let's say CASP data went down. All right. I don't think the liaison goal was ineffective.
Yeah.
However, we have to mark it as ineffective because we didn't meet the desired outcome percentage gain. However, within that, all the effective professional development, the scaffolding of lessons, the capacity building, all those things. So it's a bit mixed. So we're hopeful, one, that we don't have COVID part 2 in the next 3 years. And 2, we're hoping that our baseline and desired outcome are more clear.
Yeah.
And so that we can have a more accurate annually being able to track that. I don't know if that answered it at all.
It absolutely does. Cause that was when I was first looking at it, it kind of reminds me in, January 1st, where I'm like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds this month. And it's just an unrealistic goal. It's like, that might not happen. And so some of those goals, when I looked at them, I'm like, that was a very ambitious goal, regardless of the pandemic.
Yes.
And, getting to see all the, the granular levels of what we're doing at our schools. I know that there was a lot that was going on to even avoid what drop off was occurring.
Yes.
So it just doesn't really show that on the paper, unfortunately, when you're just looking at percentages. So that's why I wanted to say, what have you learned that informs future setting goals? And that,
Right. And thank you. And I won't make a comment about the January. All right. But that's exactly what we were looking at. So for example, our CTE, increasing CTE courses, that wasn't backed by any specific data. What the county has done, because they've seen this across, if they've sat down, and Mr. Bragg's here if there's specifics, but he's great at it and he's great for this. They've showed us 5x5 charts. They showed us how to measure more accurately because they were seeing that across. And what we don't want is our community to think we're absolutely failing when there is growth. So one of the things that they've done with English learners is really great. So reclassification rate means they're reclassified as fluent. However, we have a metric in here that's going up that says student progress. So even though you may not be reclassified as an English learner, you're making progress. We needed to create our baseline and desired outcome more along that. So we could show progress, even though we didn't necessarily meet the goal. And, with our CAST data, which we will discuss, when it's released in next year, learning loss was real. And so any of those metrics we saw, for the most part, didn't get met. So we feel like we're in a better spot. Having Mr. Bragg bringing it to you, we have met with the county twice now to look at that exactly because they want to prevent that for districts that they represent, and they've been digging into our proposed metrics that we're bringing to you all. Any other questions?
I have one or a couple. So process wise, the documents that we had to review in diligent, that's the name of it, were different than the PowerPoint, obviously, right? We're looking at the lengthy stuff that you referred people to on the website. And so if we have small feedback on that, would you like that separately?
I would love you either tell me now or email it to me.
Okay.
And anyone that's been part of our LCAP committee has continued to email me and ask questions that have been helpful. And I'm encouraging anyone in the community to look at those. And we learned something from what Mr. Van Zee said, I think on one of your first times we were presenting this, is we tried to avoid specific companies in this LCAP. We tried to make it, we're going to do equity professional development. But once you put it in the initial LCAP, you're stuck to that. And in 2 years, you may be asking, what about this company or this? So we wanted to keep that less specific so that we had freedom to make adjustments. So we've tried to do that. So anything you see, either if it's for public now or email me, because we're continuing to get adjustments. And we feel the partnership with our county is great in terms of getting their feedback, because we do want this to be something that we can have great success in. But also our goal with this time, and this is why I'm so proud of the work of our team and our district and you, is we really spent hours looking at the students with highest needs. And that's inspiring for me, at least. And I think for all of you, where we're looking at their needs. And I think we can continue that momentum.
So that leads to what my next question is, and that is, as you get feedback from us and others in the community and committee members, and you then assimilate that and bring something back to us next week that we approve, is there a way for you to flag what you've changed? Because I don't want to read that whole 150 pages again.
Come on, Ms. Hurd. Yes, I think that's a great idea. We will flag that. We'll flag that in a Google Doc, anything we get, and then
That would be
we'll
great.
target where it is on the page so that we are specific where we get the feedback. And we've received some prior because we posted it prior to this meeting, and we've received some. So I'll add that so I can get it to you in advance next week before the following meeting.
Okay. And two of the three things I have are pretty tiny, but one is a little more significant because I really was a question of what am I looking at? And so when I'm looking at the first attachment, the one that's titled 2024-25 LCAP 61124, and those are page numbered in our thing. So if I go to page 26, sorry, I'm scrolling.
Okay.
So down in the narrative under California dashboard overview, third paragraph down, it says similarly, a rate of orange for the indicator suspension rate is due to an overuse of suspension for students of color, students with disabilities, foster youth, and socioeconomic disadvantaged students. I've heard you talk about this as that the indicator is an indicator of disproportionality. You have to dig into, is the suspension warranted or not, right?
Right.
So I'm just kind of looking at it through that frame. And then when you get to the table that's on the next page,
Right.
I was trying to understand why certain schools were pulled out and what, I'm guessing from those acronyms that are in their specific groups that would be, I guess, an issue. And so can you explain the table?
Right.
Because all the schools aren't listed in the table. So just
Right.
help me understand.
And Mr. Bragg, you can, if I mess this up, come on up. The county provided us this table.
Okay.
So the county went through the data and they looked at, like I said, we had 14 schools in chronic absenteeism, but we also had student groups that were in orange or red that would match. So for example, in suspension Bella Vista, all right, that student group was in orange or red. And so they gave us this data so that we could look through and make sure we have an action or goal around those student groups. If you look back a page, you can see the indicator color status. And that's something we did locally where Mr. Bragg wrote that out. So he wrote this narrative and then the county gave us that document. And what they said with that, Ms. Hurd, is they said, you need to have actions that show you have a plan to support suspension data. So we have an action around restorative justice training or safe school ambassadors. So I think the chart may be something that might not be helpful for our community. I'm wondering how we make that more clear.
I think it just might need a little more context, but I think it addresses the question Jesse was asking of what data are you looking at to drive these actions? So I think the table is valuable. I think it just needs a little more explanation of how it works and what it's for.
And later on, thank you for that. And later on, you will see when we go to some of the specific actions, we disaggregate the data so that you can see, you know, students, foster homeless youth have this percentage or.
Right, you had that down underneath the general.
Right, so I'm thinking we need to add some detail to this so it's more clear. So
Okay.
let us take that back and work on that.
And then just generally, because as you were focusing on that the dollars that are attributed in the plan are really just our supplemental dollars. But there are kids who struggle in our community that are not part of the unduplicated group. And I could imagine that their parents are like, well, where's my kid fit into the improvement plans with LCAP? And you touched on it when you talked about how the data reflects everyone, but maybe you could kind of just talk about how the actions are hopefully helping everyone. Anyway, just I think
Right.
that's kind of a burning question in a district that gets very little supplemental about how does the LCAP serve everyone?
Right. And that's a great question, and I'm trying to answer it clearly because it became a focus at our second LCAP community meeting, where we had members of the Community Advisory Committee led by, I believe, Linda Relda, Tom leads it, and Amy Capurro, where families with students with special needs were wondering why there weren't actions in here. Okay, so that might be an example of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or Black families are wondering where the specifics. So we believe that in some of these, like a wellness room can support all. We believe that the social workers not only support the students that they're principally directed to support, but the LCAP funds allow us to also support other students. So the crisis counselors that are in here don't say, if you're not in this group, we don't serve you. So we spent a lot of time on that, but correct, our numbers are low of the student groups, but we have higher students of need as our data shows. So we believe a lot of the actions do support all. And we tried to outline that in some of the needs and what the actions are, what the actions are. For example, there was a great comment by one of a group of students. It was amazing. They said, you see the test data, low-income students can't afford tutors. They said that. So they said, can we do something in the wellness rooms or somewhere else or intervention periods? So we have a meeting Thursday with our high school, middle school leaders. How can we better use the student support period? Because not everyone in our district has the financial means to hire a tutor. And so that's the kind of input that isn't directly in there, but it gives us ideas on where we can work.
And I think some of the other things that you have included in the plan, you just don't have dollars attached to them,
Correct.
is the work around the screening data.
Correct.
And then we know that our MTSS then uses that data and
Correct.
but just because dollars aren't attributed to it. But I just think that it's worth talking about that it's not the kids aren't served, it's just they're not being tracked in this, the
Right.
dollars aren't being tracked in this plan.
Right, and they can come from other fund sources, and you might be doing some of that in the budget, but yes, there's other sources, but this specifically outlines the plan for these student groups, and then many other students benefit from those actions. But yes, you're correct.
Okay, thanks.
I'm gonna save myself from remembering to email you later, but on page 2 of the local control and accountability plan annual update. This is page 250 of the agenda packet, but page 2 of 19. On year 3 outcome, it says 2034 through 2024. So I think there's maybe a little typo there. I don't know if you guys already caught it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is helpful. That would not be good, but thank you for that.
I don't know how important it was, but
No, and we've given this to many people, so thank you for continuing to look at it. And community members that would like to join us next year, please email as well. We would love to have you at our 4 to 5 meetings that we host. And if there's anything else, and then we'll bring any changes, we'll keep a separate list as well. So you have that. Any final questions?
Yeah.
We have, and in here you'll see the California Healthy Kids Survey, and that's where we get the school connectedness and the engagement numbers. So we're open with Student Senate with you to talk about other local measures, right? But we primarily use the California Healthy Kids Survey. Then we also have some local SEL data that we use. But yes, it's always difficult if you just rely on an annual assessment because we're trying to monitor, and a lot of that is feedback we receive from our social workers, our counselors, et cetera.
Right, and perhaps, we don't need to exactly take that into the LCAP procedures, but I'm sure you guys have done a great job of incorporating student feedback for mental health, specifically with the Student Senate and whatnot. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify, Mr. Arata, you have, for your public comment, you have it for item 11.4, but it says draft budget. Did you mean 11.5?
We swapped it.
Oh,
We swapped
yeah,
it in
it
the
got
beginning.
changed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want, yeah. Great. Okay. All right. I'll hold this for that. Sorry. Okay. Thank you for your work. This is a public hearing, so we will gavel out of the public hearing.
You.
All right. So now moving on to 11.5, public hearing for the proposed 24-25 district budget. So that's Stella Kemp and Evan Miller. Oh, and I gavel in again. It's changed.
Good evening, trustees, and let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to, I think this is the second time I've been up here presenting the budget to the board for your consideration and for the public response to the budget. Before we get going, I wanted just to make sure that I point out that there are a number of people behind the scenes who've been working really hard on this budget. My colleague in crime here, Mr. Miller, and Nicole Kugler, Sandra Corsetti, the entire business department, accounts payable, accounts receivable, budget analysts, payroll technicians, buyers, principals who put their budgets together, departments that put their budgets together. It has been a journey that started in January. Collectively, this group works together to make it possible to accurately report on the district's financial position, this report this evening, as well as to the public as required by law. Before we begin our presentation, I just want to make a few comments about the budget, and you'll hear some of this again later on, but I'm going to front load you. So the budget does look a little bit different since second interim. And as you can see at second interim, we were talking about the deficit spending for this year. It's gone up a little bit, and we'll talk about that. And I'll also talk about what we've done to try to rein in expenditures so we are living within our means. And that is a step that started earlier, and we'll share that with you in a little bit. State's still working on the budget. As you know, the projections were wildly off, and but they're negotiating over there in California in Sacramento rather. The legislature is supposed to have a budget by the 15th and signed by the governor by the 30th. We're hearing about this Prop 98 suspension bill. We want to learn a little bit more about that and how that will affect us in the out years. And so we want to also let you know that, we, as you know, the COLA is significantly lower than projected this time last year. And we also know that we're sitting in a situation where we have a parcel tax that expires in June of 2025 and the implications of that. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Evan, and then I will wrap up at the end.
All right, thank you very much. So a couple quick slides to just review where we are as a district and as a state. Right now we are at, zeros are off, but the adopted budget and estimated actuals period, both due by July 1st. And then overall, as far as the state goes, the governor releases his budget in mid-January. He updates it in May, and we're in this period between that and legislature adoption and governor enacting the state budget. And so again, as Dr. Kemp mentioned, we're in a period where we are required to approve our local budget without knowing really fully how the state will fund us in the upcoming year. Broad overview of the economy and the state budget, things mostly look positive, especially compared to what we were looking at last year. But there are still some challenges that are listed there that remain. We'll see how those work themselves out. Reminder that the state revenue is highly dependent on our highest earners. So those big three tax revenues, and they are lower than the January projections that the governor brought. But importantly, there's no recession predicted, I think, either from the governor's office or the legislative analyst's office. And at the same time, budget revenues could be $5 billion lower in the upcoming period, according to the LAO. So we think that the risk level overall for the state is high, and at the same time note that there are tools still available for them. So we'll see how the legislature and governor resolve the budget problem, but there are some tools available. And then finally on the Prop 98 maneuver, it appears to be resolved. We don't know the exact details yet. So again, still in a little bit of a waiting game as far as what's going to happen at the state level. So the things we do know, 1.07 COLA for LCFF and categoricals. Remember that this does not necessarily mean an increase to the local revenues for the upcoming year. And it is much lower than forecasted at this time last year. Most of the things that we learned in the May revision didn't actually apply to the upcoming year. They are programs that will be updated in the out years. I think as they tried to resolve revenue issues, you know, they pushed some of their programs out to the future years. The last piece there on the local reserve cap, we are pretty sure that it will be lifted for the upcoming year because they will draw down from the Prop 98 reserve fund. But we don't know that for sure. So we are going into the upcoming year, keeping that in mind. And at the same time, we're projecting to be well below the reserve cap for the upcoming year. So as far as local data, the first few lines here are student population data. We still continue to project declining enrollment. It is slightly flatter than what we projected at second interim, although a slightly bigger decline in the budget year. So we think it will continue to flatten out over time, especially as we see new developments come on board. But for now, we are projecting, you know, still significant losses, about over 400 students in each year of this projection. At the same time, our unduplicated count continues to rise, so those percentages continue to increase. So supplemental dollars do continue to increase. I think the main thing we want to take away from this slide, though, is in the budget year 24-25, the combination of those student population data and the 1.07% COLA results in lower LCFF revenues for the upcoming year to the tune of about $7 million. That is a decline of about 2.12%. So we're going to hear a lot about a 1.07 COLA. When we calculate that out for this district, it means a decline in revenues of our biggest funding source from year to year. One of the things we talked about this, and we had this slide at second interim, but we really think funded ADA is a concept that is really important. So we wanted to come back to it again this year, or for adopted budget. So ADA protections have been in place for quite a while. For a long time, it was either that you were funded on your current year ADA or prior year ADA if you were in a period of declining enrollment. And a couple of years ago, the legislature enacted a third way to hold districts harmless for decline in enrollment, and that is to use the average of the 3 prior years ADA. And so our district is in that period right now. And I think the story of this kind of starts in 2020-21 when we see that ADA, again, because of additional COVID projections, was held flat from the prior year. So when we look at our funded ADA for last year, the 3 prior years, we are going to use those 3 years, 2020-21 through 2022-23. That funded ADA, the average of those 3 years for 23-24 ended up being higher than our enrollment for the year. And then we continue to do this exercise for the budget year where we're using these 3 data points to get an average ADA or our funded ADA of 28,447. And then for the first subsequent year, we've added as well. And I think the story that we really want to take away from here is we are experiencing, this is the year of a really steep decline because we lost that 2021 year from the average. We are seeing a steep decline this year that then we think will begin to eventually flatten as that 3-year ADA and, you know, we lose that one real outlier year begins to take hold. So this is the tough year, I think, that we are looking at as far as revenue. And then other revenues are mostly flat. We have lots of COLA programs. Again, 1% is mostly offset by declining enrollment. We do continue to see the Prop 28 arts and music in schools allegation. And then, excuse me, also wanted to note that we do have our parcel tax that will expire at the end of this year, if not renewed. But we do include it in our subsequent year assumptions. So important to note that it is included in our revenue beyond the current expiration. On the expenditure side, these are just the cost of doing business from year to year. Those STRS rates do stay flat, which is nice, but reminder that, 2015, these were at about 8% or a little over 8%. So they have still increased significantly over the past 10-year period. PERS rates continue to increase. Turn the page for salaries increases. And then we're also seeing lots of our cost pressures on health and welfare benefits, property and liability insurance increases, and also utility bill increases. So we are seeing some cost pressures outside of salaries and benefits. So as a comparison for the 24-25 adopted budget to our current estimates for the current budget year, LCFF revenues, again, we see in state aid that $7 million decrease. In federal and other state revenues, most of those are due to exhaustion of COVID dollars that we are using up in the current year. They will run out at the end of this year. And then other local revenues, we do have some one-time grants that are expiring. We also tend to see those revenues increase over the course of the year as some of our partners are able to raise dollars that they donate to the district. On the expenditure side, on certificated salaries, we're seeing a decrease. That's a combination of declining enrollment as well as some of the reductions that were approved this past spring. On the classified side, we see an increase. This is mostly due to budgeting. At this point in the year, we budget to be fully staffed for next year, but we know that we have always traditionally had trouble filling some classified staff positions across the district. And so what we will see at first interim is probably a reduction there in classified staff and an increase in the services and other operating expenditures as we contract out some of those services. Books and supplies, we see a reduction as compared to the current year, mostly due to our delay in the one-to-one device refresh, as well as some textbook adoptions that we will be delaying as part of our budget balancing solutions for next year. And then the big delta there on services, same thing on services and operating expenditures, as well as kind of we expect those to increase as some contracted services fill in for classified staff. So the multi-year projection, revenues we see begin to recover. This is the 1 year due to that ADA issue that we see lower revenues compared year to year. We will note, again, parcel taxes included in the out years, and we have a $1 million transfer in projected for 25-26 from Fund 17 to ensure that we have a positive fund balance at year end. On the expenditure side, we mostly see expenditures increase on the normal. We will note, though, that other adjustments line, so right above the total in the out year, we will need to find $16.5 million in budget balancing solutions in order to make the budget work. And so that'll be something that Dr. Kemp will be talking about a little bit more as we move forward. And then finally, the results of all those revenues and expenditures in the current or in the budget and projected years on our fund balance. And we can see that we are projected to end the year with a fund balance, positive fund balance for all 3 years, as well as meet that minimum required reserve for economic uncertainties of at least 3% for all 3 years. And then finally, because budget does tie to LCAP, we've repeated these slides from the LCAP. So revenue picture, as well as the expenditure picture in the LCAP. And one of the statutory requirements is that the budget does describe that the LCAP can be afforded in the budget. And so we think that this picture does describe that as well. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Kemp.
All right, thank you, Evan. All right, so I wanted kind of wrap this up by going over a couple of things. First, just recognizing and reiterating the key points that we have. So the district is experiencing declining enrollment, and in a time of declining enrollment and a COLA of about 1.07%, we actually are realizing a negative 2.1%, 2.11% less than we received this current year. We are assuming in our budget proposal that the parcel tax will renew before June 30th, 2025. We're also assuming that we will find $16.5 million in ongoing cuts to implement in the 25-26 school year. We're going to make a $1 million transfer from Fund 17 to 01 for 25-26, and that all the budgeted expenditures for this coming year stay within the projections. So that being said, I do want to talk a little bit about what we've already done to be proactive, recognizing this. So in 23-24, we made about $5.3 million in reductions. And then going into 24-25, we identified the 10 million that the board asked us to do. And these things were done through shifting things into one-time funding or completely eliminating some expenditures. And so for 25-26, we know we have to make 16.5 million in expenditure reductions. So to do this, my proposal is that we reestablish the Budget Advisory Committee in August of 2024, and that this committee would have representatives of staff, board members, and or members of the community who would then review the budget, review everything as much as they can, and come up with some recommendations that then would be shared with executive cabinet, and then we'd bring this to the board for consideration. We need to move quickly and with all due course to implement this committee. I would like to launch it at the beginning of September and meet as regularly as we can to evaluate expenditures, evaluate programs, to then identify the reductions that we would then bring a preliminary reductions to the December board meeting with the first interim. Some other things I wanted to talk a little bit about that we're doing right now. Of course, we have an approach for, in the meanwhile, while this committee is getting up and running, what can we do now to ensure that next year stays within the projected budget? And what can we do to identify some cost savings as we go into next year? And so some of the things that we believe are important around the systems work is monitoring and planning. And so training our leaders on budget development and budget monitoring of their school sites, and then really looking at our systems that have traditionally overrun and implement our monitoring system with those particular departments, and then having a budget process monitoring cycle in cabinet to review that and making sure everyone's informed about where we are standing. The other thing we are going to do is we're going to look at possible funding source shifts. And for example, one of the shifts that we made was to move a portion of the lead custodian at the school sites into the routine restricted maintenance budget, because they do some site maintenance on their school sites, but they were all funded out of general fund. So we moved a portion of their salaries into that particular budget, which is a required set aside. And we're going to monitor that to see how that's going. And then really working with the departments and the teams to, while you've prepared and submitted a budget for next year, do you need to spend everything in your budget? Because if we can make some reductions to soften the impact into the next year, that would be really helpful for us. The other thing we're going to look at is really, I think, is understanding our staffing ratios with enrollment for non-bargain positions, review position control system, making sure that we're really so tight with all of these things that we're following the procedures that have been established, and that we have a good sense of the positions that we have. We think also one area to look at is with our secondary schools is really looking at their master schedules and helping them to understand how to build a really efficient and structured of a master schedule that maximizes the staff, the staffing that they've been allocated. And then we have to look at the right sizing of our schools, because if we have enrollment coming in below the forecasted enrollment, then we have to look at, okay, what are we going to do with that particular classroom? What's the best way to reallocate that staff if we need to reallocate that staff member? And this kind of gets into the boundary work that we need to do next year with the Bishop Branch community starting to come on board. We need to make sure that we are, that every school where the students will matriculate into, that we have the appropriate staffing, and we've done the boundary work to make sure that we're not leaving one school really small while one school is getting large. So that will be work that's happening next fall. I want to talk a little bit about special education because when Linda was up here, I went and looked up the special education funding contributions since 2011. You know, when IDEA was passed, President Johnson turned to his staff and he said, "I don't think we're ever going to be able to fund this." Well, since 2011, the federal contribution for special education was 13.6%, and now it's at 8.3%. So federal government their contribution overall for special ed has gone down. The state contribution for special ed has gone from 36.3% to 21.6%. The local contribution, there's a local local property tax, it's gone from 15.3% to 13.7%. And a contribution for school districts to special education has gone from 34.8% to 56.5%. So the contribution that we've been making is really grown quite a bit in the last 11 years. And I think this is something we should study, we should advocate for, and inform our community about how we can best have a high quality program, but at the same time, look at what we're doing to make sure that that we're spending wisely with the programs for special education. And I think this gets to my very last point here, which is around communication, community, and understanding of our budget. So we are working on a website that will have some FAQs. We have a presentation that's been done, but it really is upon all of us to make sure our community understands, particularly with the parcel tax that we will have to go out for again in November or whenever the board decides to put on the ballot, that we're informing our community really around how San Ramon Valley is one of the lowest funded school districts in the state of California. And because the current funding formula leans more towards large urban districts and rural districts. And districts like ours rely on our community support to address the financial situation with local measures. So with that, we just wanted to kind of go over the timelines. So you'll see us again in August with our 45-day revise. Well, you'll see us again next week with the action to adopt the budget. Then we'll have the 45-day revise in August, and then we will launch our budget advisory committee in August, September. We have our unaudited actuals in September, and then our first interim in December, which we'd like to bring back with a budget reduction plan. And in order to make sure that this budget reduction plan that the seriousness of this budget reduction plan is understood, I will bring a resolution to the next board meeting with the adoption of the budget that outlines the budget reduction plan and the timeline to prepare this for the board. So with that, we're open to questions.
Any questions?
So I see that we have an updated table there, and I like how other adjustments with these reductions being right there as its own line makes it really, really clear.
Yeah,
Basically, those are the cuts. we're
Yes,
talking about.
that was our error. We had it in the slide deck, but hadn't corrected it in the packet.
This is kind of minutia-like, and so if you want to look into it and you can report on it next week, you can. Kind of deep down in the whole budget thing, you know, where you're at the end where it's different conditions and then past. You know, I'm talking about down at I'm on page 140 out of 145. There's two different places on 140 and then a few pages later where there's an exception. Can you explain what that is about, or it can wait till next week?
Is that the positive?
Yeah, the
Exception.
OBJ positive warning. Sounds like it's something related to how the county booked property taxes.
Oh, yeah, so the this is called the TRC technical review check that the software does automatically for you. That's a object 8660 is a revenue object, so it would typically be assumed to be positive. It doesn't, the system doesn't kick this out and say this is a fatal error. This is just a warning that needs to be explained. But basically, the county collects property taxes on our behalf. And in the current year, it is a negative amount, and so we are projecting it to be negative again next year.
So it sounds like it's kind of an automatic thing and it just flags a warning that this
flags
is
a
not
warning.
normally negative.
Correct.
Figure it
Give us an explanation for why. And,
Okay.
and our explanation is that the county is for whatever reason accounted for a negative amount of property tax for this one object code.
One little piece. Okay. And then there's another one a few pages down. Thank you.
I had that question too, so thank you for asking that. And then you already, I think, very clearly defined that the 25-26 school year would be facing another $16.5 million
At a minimum.
minimum. And that was with the assumption of our existing parcel tax staying exactly the same as it is in passing. So this would
Yes.
be similar to E passing, but not F, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and minus the
Minus
inflator thing,
yeah,
CPI.
the CPI indicator. All right, that was it. I just wanted to understand what we're potentially facing. Thank you.
Yes. So if it doesn't pass, that 16.5 grows by 6.8.
That's correct.
Yeah, that was my question, was what does it look like? And so then if it grows by that much, that means we will no longer have the 3% required.
We will have to make the cuts in order to make the 3% or end up with a
Yeah.
qualified, with a budget.
Right. So essentially, the only way that we're qualified at this point in out years is based on a renewal that did not happen.
Right. In December, when we come back to the board with our first interim, at that point, we'll have the results from the election. And if we are not successful in the November election for the renewal of the policy tax, we'll end up with a qualified budget.
Okay. And so we're assuming that.
Well, if you recall, when we had the facilities workshop, we discussed that we need to go out
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
we didn't take formal action, but we took the beginning steps of
Yeah.
beginning polling and those kind of things.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of be clear on that, and so that we have an understanding and the community has an understanding that there's a lot at stake. It's, and unfortunately, we now have the history of it not passing. So I think that means that it doesn't feel as safe as it felt a few months ago, for sure.
Related to engaging the community in the budget advisory committee, I think that's all fantastic. I got a nudge in the last week to go look at a revised lesson in Ed 100 on Prop 98 and dove in reading just straight through about halfway through. And I was like, this is good stuff. I mean, it really could be valuable to incorporate in informing our community about how all this works, because it's more than LCFF and supplemental and concentration, and this isn't fair to us kind of thing. But the whole concept of the three-pronged thing with the personal income tax, the property tax, and the sales tax, how that interacts, it focuses on it really gets into the basic aid thing, and the dynamics on that is really, really interesting. And I think for people who really want to understand it, it would give them a really excellent whole picture. So it definitely seems like something a budget advisory committee would benefit from going through.
Thank you.
And it's so easily accessible how it's written. I know PTA has a big push on making it kind of a contest and all that, but it's really a fantastic resource.
Right. We do have a public comment, so we'll take that, and then, so that's Mike Arata.
I apologize for the sign from March and April having text at the top that refers back to measures E and F, which were defeated on May 7th. With recent travel, I didn't have time to update that particular portion of the sign. But the graphical portion of it is something I will be mentioning now. And a copy of that is still available at betterschoolsnotmoretaxes.com. Your draft budget shows estimated year-end enrollment for the just completed 23-24 school year at 29,200 students, with a further decline expected for 24-25 down to 28,710. And these were the actual enrollments, not the ADAs, so far as I can tell. And with further substantial declines predicted in subsequent 2 years. Yet your budget numbers continue their inexorably upward trajectory, continuing to exceed the combined and compounded effect of inflation and enrollment decline. The chart shows your historic spending pattern over the last 33 years. It's the mountain in green, and in front of that are the combined effect of inflation and enrollment decline in dark blue. Fresh off the failure of measures E and F, parcel tax scams, fresh off your 8.5% and 6% raises with supposed one-time 1% increments, your budget still tries to make a parcel tax renewal and increase appear to be necessary. So you will soon be back on the ballot again, still to support yet another round of raises. But as is, and in inflation and enrollment adjusted terms, you're already $127 million ahead of 2015 when the parcel tax was last renewed. And over the last 33 years, you're even further ahead, something on the order of $172 million. You'd have to lose a lot more than 16.5 million or 23.3 million with the parcel tax money for you to regain parity with the effects of inflation and enrollment decline. The losing margins for Measure E and F may well have been those parents and other taxpayers who've been paying attention to your budgetary irresponsibility and continuous game of compensation leapfrog that you and other local districts play. Hopefully, some of the same parents and other taxpayers who've become disgusted with your curricular intrusions, along with the finances, the curricular intrusions from LGBTQ grooming conducted in captive audience transition kindergarten classrooms, ranging to the depraved pornography collections in your libraries, and increasingly now in your classrooms. Ideally, such community members will spread the word to others who haven't paid sufficient attention to your galloping budgetary and curricular irresponsibility, what I continue to be your budgetary and curricular malfeasance. Hope people wake up and pay attention to the big picture, both scholastically and dollar-wise. You can do a lot better, and I hope the parents and other taxpayers are beginning to realize that.
Thank you, Mike. All right, any other comments or questions?
I wish I'd made my Ed 100 comment after public comment. I highly encourage the people in this community to understand how education spending works and that our employees do not work for free.
Thank you.
We strive to pay our teachers what they're worth, and we fail miserably sometimes because we don't have the funding. And there may be a lot of charts out there and all different ways to compare the spending that we've spent over the years and what it compares to other things. But what I know is the actual amounts of money that we have and the way that they're being spent, we spend a lot of time as well as our assistant superintendent of business operations and that whole team trying to find ways to economize, to make more efficient. Our eyes are on that all the time. So regardless of what some chart says, we have the actuals here. And in order to keep qualified teachers and qualified administrators, people get raises when they do a good job and I work in private industry. If I treated my highly qualified salespeople like some people want us to treat our teachers and our administrators, I wouldn't have anybody working for me. So I agree with Rachel. Ed 100 is a great place to get the straight talk on the way funding works and why we're in the position that we're in right now. It's not because of inefficient management or that we don't take fiscal responsibility for the funding that we get. It's just we don't get enough. And that's why the parcel tax at even $6.8 million, you can see how important that is to us because of where we find ourselves.
I'll add to that because I mean, this is an important discussion. We always want to make sure that we're being, good, practicing good, fiscal responsibility and being good fiduciaries over the dollars that we do have from taxpayer money. And I think it's a good indicator to know that, as we are trying to attract and retain our highly qualified staff and teachers, it would be an indicator if there are some that move to other districts because they can get paid more money. And that's something that we want to not have happen. We don't want to lose high quality teachers to something like that. So that's an indicator to me too, that there's competition in the market and we're not, excessively paying that. Now we've got to be smart with dollars and cents. And we want to make sure that we're able to focus those. I want to make sure we're able to focus those dollars on attracting and retaining good quality staff, and not just teachers, but our entire staff. The other thing that I do wonder too, as we have this discussion, is if we compare to maybe baseline calculations in the past, schools changed a lot. You've got advances in technology, which adds baseline dollars to what it takes to educate in the modern classroom. And so I do think that those are some things that I'd take into consideration too, as I look at those inflation of those dollars too.
Thank you. So I guess we will gavel out of this public hearing. Thank you, Stella and Evan. And now we'll move on to 11.6, consideration of acceptance of the independent financial audit for the 22-23 fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. So that's Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations, Stella Kemp, once again.
So I'm going to invite Evan Miller to come up as well. We have a couple of items from the auditors on the agenda, items 11.6 and 11.7. Before we get into the contents of the audit, if there are any questions from the board members, I just want to talk a little bit about just giving you laying the foundation for why this audit is coming to you so late. Our auditor, the one that we had last year, retired before we received, and when she retired, the audit was not completely complete because we were waiting on a J-18 waiver from the state related to the closure of school at Charlottewood last year. And if we had submitted the audit to you within the timeline without that J-18 waiver, we would have incurred some penalties on our attendance and revenue that would have been rectified once that waiver came through in March. That's when we received it. So we had applied for an extension, received an extension from the state, and then around the same time she retired, and the audit files were turned over to another auditor in a different office within the same firm. And what we've come to understand is that the offices operate sort of like different, they're not all under one umbrella. They were like franchises. So it went to a different auditor at a different location who basically redid the audits. And at the same time as he was redoing the audits, we had filed an RFP for audit firms and had selected a different audit firm to begin our 23-24 audits. So this is kind of a timeline crossing, people retiring, and an auditor who knew he was on the way out the door. So with that, he was here in the meeting, he's left. We would like to review the audits with you, and I want Evan to talk a little bit about what we've done with the audits and how we've turned them over to our new audit firm, who will be helping us through the audits. And you have two on the agenda, 11.6, 11.7. One is for our general fund or for our regular funds. One is for Measure D, and then later on we have one for the JPA.
So I'm happy to take any questions about either of the audit reports that are in there. There are findings and there is a qualified opinion of our district audited financial statements. They are listed here in the board item. the qualified opinion and internal controls are about OPEB reporting and the GASB statement number 84 regarding fiduciary funds. There's a GAN limit calculation that was a result of state software issues, and then some immunizations that were reported incorrectly as far as attendance goes. So I'm happy to answer any questions there. For the first one, we are kind of deep into working with our new auditors because those could require some restatements to the current to the fund balance as we start the next year's audit. So those are the ones that I think are probably more concerning for the auditor, but we are very clear that we think that how OPEB benefits were reported both in the actuary study and in the audit are correct. It was, I think, a disagreement with the auditor to a certain extent. And the GASB 84 fiduciary activity was actually something that should have been addressed several years ago and never was by the current audit, by the former auditing firm. You know, the financial statements are always the district's responsibility, but we do rely on our contracted support to help us understand how to implement those things. And it never happened over the period of three or four years since GASB 84. So I think with that, I'm happy to take any questions unless there's something else you want.
Does anyone have any questions?
So it sounds like, if I understood you correctly, the new auditor will help you correct these things and get everything
Yeah.
back in line.
Yes, we actually had a meeting with the new auditor and with the firm that oversees our OPEB program. And you know, the auditor who wrote the finding could not offer any recommendations of what we should have done. Just he didn't like what this particular firm had done, and where it has never been a problem before was basically calculating those who qualified for OPEB and those who did not. And so it was a difference in opinion on the number of employees and how we were reporting that in the OPEB report.
And if they will either help us restate the beginning balance, or they may say that that this finding actually was not material and won't restate the balance because of
And then the one from the past, they'll help us figure out how to correct it and refile.
that one will be a restatement of the balance.
Okay. Because it was just like, oh my gosh, I've never seen
I
you
know.
one of these before.
We were really surprised.
Your
We were really,
explanation helps.
yes, we were really surprised by especially the OPEB, because we couldn't understand what he was referring to and sought clarification, never received clarification. The GASB 75, 75, 57,
84.
84, one of those numbers. That came out a while ago and should have been caught several years before, and we assumed that it was in place.
I think the other thing that I'll just offer is, because of the timeline, this audit report got pushed way back. Our new auditors can't start the audit until the prior audit report is finished. We got to a certain point where we need to start the current year audit. Schools are closed, but they need to audit our attendance procedures. So we have staff coming back over the summer to support that part of the audit. We got to a point where we were like, we just need to wrap this up and move forward with the new firm.
So our action is to approve the audit as presented, and we can say, and we trust staff will follow through with the new auditor on the corrective actions.
Yes.
Can I make that as a motion as I stated it?
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Student Board Member Hodges.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Pratt.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you, Stella and Evan. And thank you to our new auditor. Okay, 11.7, consideration of acceptance of the independent financial audit of the building fund of the general obligation bond measure D election of 2012 for the fiscal year ending June 20th, 2023.
Okay, so the audit was completed for Measure D, there were no findings in the audit. It says that the financial statements referred to were presented fairly with all material respects, and that the financial position of Measure D as of the time of June 30th, 2023, and the changes in the financial position in accordance with the principles generally accepted by the United States of America. So there were no findings in the Measure D audit.
Any questions or comments from the board? No? Okay, thank you so much. I think we need to take action.
I'll make a motion to adopt the audit for Measure D.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Roll call vote, Student Board Member Hodges.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. Thank you, Stella. Right, next is 11.8, consideration of adoption of the district's 2024 long-range facilities plan. And again, that's Stella Kemp.
Okay, I just have the floor tonight, don't I? Okay, so I want to thank the trustees for attending the May 8th board workshop, where our architects and our team were here to share the long-range facility master plan, which began in 2022, November of 2022. So we've been working on this quite a long time. I'd like to recognize Erin Hurst, our Director of Facilities, who's in the back of the room. And we have our architects, Mariana Lavezzo and Andrea Pippin, who are here from LPA Architects to present the updates that were provided by the board at the board workshop on May 8th. And we seek tonight, what we do is we seek adoption of the long-range facility plan.
Thank you, Stella. Good evening, President Bratt, members of the board. It has truly been an honor to work with this district. It's kind of one of those elite districts that you always hope to win doing this kind of project. But so again, been an honor. I'll go through the update since we last saw you in May. So again, just to go through that, kind of what your next steps are and where we have landed in the prioritized project list based on your comments in the May 8th meeting. And then Mariana will briefly, we know it's already getting late, so we'll just go over the deliverable content really quickly, previewing the website, and she'll introduce how to find those lookbooks, really those 10 lookbooks that are really the meat of the long-range facilities plan. So quick overview of the schedule. We are here at number 3. We've done the board workshop. We've integrated your comments. We're here seeking adoption of this long-range plan. That ends your contract with LPA as it stands. Your next step would be to go through all the motions to try to secure funding. Without funding, none of this can happen. So none of this is promised at this point, but this sets the stage for taking further action on this. And as you recall, at that board workshop, every strategy set in place to develop this prioritized project list was based on your past track record of being good stewards of the community dollars in really pursuing the school facilities program funding, following each school facilities 25-year cycle for modernization eligibility and select targeted projects to ensure equity in your facilities across the district and to accommodate growth. So phase 1, as it has landed, the only comments that you wanted to see incorporated was the inclusion of Walt Disney Elementary School to the refresh modernization list, as well as Doherty Valley High, some select projects. So what we see here for, we've got a couple slides on phase 1, but in terms of campus modernization projects, it is the sites you see listed here, either a refresh or a deep modernization, depending on the site needs and how long ago that site has been modernized. This takes into account refresh of existing finishes, carpets, etc., building systems. And for that deep modernization, it is where campuses have already seen a couple rounds of modernization and really requires more deep level of improvement, or where we see pockets of extreme growth. Also included in your phase 1 priorities is to ensure transitional kindergarten and kindergarten classrooms see improvements across the district to maintain your half-day programs where they exist for TK and kindergarten, excuse me, or your existing programs, whether they be full day or half day. But to ensure all of those facilities are equipped with the proper sizing of classrooms and have appropriate facilities such as restrooms attached to them. So regardless of modernization eligibility date, the sites will receive TKK improvements, safety and security improvements, and technology infrastructure. So no site is left out in your prioritized project list. Added to this list of select sites with limited scope was again that Doherty Valley High School. So like I say, they'll all see safety, security, technology, but your comments were to add food service improvements to Doherty Valley High School. So that was what was changed on this slide. The Monte Vista High School project list did not change since we last met for the board workshop. We spelled these out specifically because it is not a full campus modernization, but rather targeted for the projects on that site that are of high need, such as the Building 300 replacement for a new science wing, renovation at the commons and kitchen, and a replacement of the admin and student services building, among other projects you see there on the screen. To get a full summary view of phase 1, here it is. And we can see the total there at the bottom of the slide, $584,508,000. This is all in 2024 dollars. So the next steps, once funding is secured, your district planners and facilities leadership will go through an implementation phase where they will tie each of these projects to a timeline and should escalate these dollars to the anticipated midpoint of construction to develop an appropriate budget for these projects. So those would be in your next steps should funding become available. If you are lucky enough to finish phase 1 projects, this is your phase 2 prioritized project list, which would be continuing to march through campus modernization as sites become eligible. You could consider to move towards full day TK and kindergarten programs. And we have here in 2024 dollars the impact that would have on facilities. And another consideration in prioritization for phase 2 is that Monte Vista Theater replacement. So we could pause now for questions before we move on to the show and tell of the website, or go back to the end.
Prioritizing the projects, they're prioritized based on their age and the eligibility to get state funding, correct? And then the rest of them are prioritized the same way as far as, or is that something that we'll do, our facilities people will do when we, if and when we get funding? Setting the priorities for which ones get done first.
So like even in phase 1, yes, it would follow along their timeline for eligibility.
Yeah, it's really around bandwidth. So we'll have to identify, you know, what are we going to focus on first? Where do we have growth that we need to address right away? You know, where do we have safety issues that we need to address right away? And so on and so, and then what can we do in terms of bandwidths with all of the projects that are out there? So this will happen once we receive funding.
Yeah, and tied to the funding strategy, you can't spend it unless you already have it. So it would, even if you pass something in the fall, we know it doesn't all come to you at once. So it would have to marry up with any other kind of funding strategies.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question on, I think it's the slide that says phase 1 campus modernization projects, and it breaks it into refresh and deep. So I was a little confused about, okay, the asterisks mean just that it's not a whole campus mod, it's where you had specific programs. That I understood more once you did it. When I was reading it by itself, I was like, what? And then the red is just highlighting 2 things that we added during the workshop. Correct. But the red down under next to the asterisk just happens to be red because it's a note. Right, okay. I was trying to go, what's the key here on the color coding? Okay, thank you. That's good. And my other comment related to the website, so I'll wait till you get there. Okay, great. Thank you.
San Ramon icon at the top. That'll take us to the splash page. And then if you could just slowly scroll down while I explain it. So the point of the website is it's really a tool to make this very accessible to the whole community. It really acts as an executive summary of the whole plan. It has 4 landing pages. So in the world of communications, we think of the runner, the jogger, and the walker. So the runner can go through this website and come out able to tell 2 friends about what they learned, and they'll tell 2 friends and so on. So really a tool to get the community engaged and make it a very nice kind of slow experience where they can understand everything. There are links throughout that will take you to things like your strategic directions, and that's maybe for the jogger. They're going to go in and check a few things out. And then the walker is going to go down, and I'll get to that in a bit, the resources. Yeah, so if you go, then the next part you click on about, and it tells you more. So it's all, you know, very easy to digest and understand, just get you to slow down and pause. So there's an example of, we don't have to open it, but there's a welcome video there. So there's different links integrated throughout. So you keep scrolling. And you will get, when we get to the menu, keep going to the bottom and we'll click about again. If you keep going all the way to the bottom. Okay, you can click on about there. So at the top, if you like go to building blocks, yeah, you can scroll down and you can see the 4 building blocks of the plan. We've put in some photos of the great work that the district has done. And there's your strategic directions link as an example of a place to pause and link back to something else on the district website. And sometimes there's links to the booklets that we'll get to. So that was one about. Okay, and at the bottom and the top, you can always click get in touch. And that's where you want to say something about the plan. And then there's another section where you can click stay updated. And so as news starts to evolve around this plan, you'll be on a email list and you'll get updates. So now on full plan, we'll get to the resource library, which is where all those lookbooks are. So this is the 3rd out of the 4th landing page. So it doesn't take that much time to go through the whole website just to skim and understand what this is all about. And then here's where we get to the lookbooks that we included in your package. So this is meant to help the user get straight to what they want to get to go as deep as they want to go. It's both for the broader community, but it's also for the future architects and engineers. So they'll need to really study the campus summary booklet, the design guidelines, because that's what will give you parity district-wide. Like the design guidelines are going to give them the information that really tailored what was driving those site diagrams. And that's a a fundamental part. And then the campus plan summary is for them to see the proposed plan and the existing diagram. And that's also for families that want to know what's happening on their kids' campus. They can go in that book and they can see the summary of what's new construction, what's modernization, renovation, and how the program is distributed. So that's basically the overview. It's like any website, you can go as deep as you want, but I just wanted to share with you overall the intention behind it and how it works, and ready for any questions anyone might have.
So I checked it out because you had that link right on the first page. And I have a district issued laptop and it just seems like it doesn't fit it. It doesn't size. And so the text goes into the photos and it just seems kind of odd that it wouldn't fit on a laptop. And I wondered, was it created on a big screen? It looks fine up here when you're showing it here.
Our web designer tests it on a small laptop. I don't know if that one's smaller than usual, like that kind of laptop, a larger screen, an iPad.
So clearly it tested on a lot.
And when we made changes, I could see, he would say, okay, open it on your phone. Oh, that doesn't work. Okay, we need to play with this. So I kind of got it.
So I'm just curious if anyone else had a chance, like,
Did you
think it's pretty important that it works
Yeah.
standard on a district
I
issued
think
one.
you can hit control negative and
And
plus.
I'll try
to
that.
Play with that. Yeah, because
I tried the
if
scanning
you're
it
very
in and
zoomed out, then it won't.
yeah,
fit. You
and
have to-
and I'm not.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that picture that gets bigger as you look at it. I just think that's really, I mean, I was starting to feel nauseous just as you were scrolling. So I'm just wondering if maybe that movement, if we really want people to
Yeah.
look at this, I think we need to consider some things like that.
Right, we will fix it before it goes live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a ton of great information in there and you're right. It's where you want people to go to learn all about the projects and get behind the bond measures.
Yeah.
Measure.
I'll get the spec on that laptop and
Okay,
see what
thank you.
we do.
But I appreciate how much work went into that.
So I have a little bit different of an opinion. I do like the dynamic website look, but maybe it doesn't have to get as big as quick. I mean, a good example, gosh, I don't know if I'm supposed to say companies from up here, but like if you look at apple.com, it has that dynamic, really modern approach, which I think is a little bit of what we're going for of like, this is fresh, this is modern.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you're gonna probably have a very, but I do think at the end of the day, it's gotta be readable and not make people, why is this thing jumping off the page? So maybe there's just a way to tone it down, but keep some of those aesthetics.
Can I ask with this website, is this something that will live for the next 10 years as we're doing this planning, or is this just a piece that will live for the generating the revenue for the bond measure for those types of things?
I've got this. So we do have a license for 5 years.
We're hosting it.
You're hosting it for 5 years and then it shifts over to us. If we want to pay for that, yes.
And
I
then,
think
and then their part of the contract is updating, and I know that there's the form for get updates. Who is providing those updates for the mailing list? That's
The
the
district.
district. Okay,
Yeah, so,
okay.
if you have a comment and you click there to reach out, it'll go to an email at the district and somebody will.
Gotcha. So it's folded into our comms.
And then if you
Stuff.
want
Okay,
to
good.
get on the list, any news that the district wants to push out will go to that listserv.
Okay, and so then as the district, we can update too as we make changes to as
yes,
plans are being solidified and whatnot.
That'll be on your website.
Right.
be on our
It's
website.
linked on your website and all that news is happening on your website and there's a link that takes you to this deliverable.
And when we post something new to our facilities website, we can actually make sure we send it out to that group.
So as you said, this essentially is a lookbook. It's a roadmap, kind of an opportunity, but it's not a website that's evolving. It's an informational website. Yeah.
In lieu of traditionally it's been a PDF of binder, like 3 binders this thick and they just sit on the facilities director's shelf and it's hard for the community to know what happens.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
When we did the actual construction with the Measure D funds, we had a building website that we kept up with all the recent projects on it and stuff when it actually gets started.
Yes,
I
exactly.
think this is great because hopefully it'll inspire people to
And-
want to vote
and it-
for a bond.
Exactly. And it also has some key components in there for the future architects as we start to do the planning
Yeah.
and scoping out the work and identifying what the projects are at each specific site. All of that information is there. It's ready for them. They don't have to go in and do a needs assessment. It's been done. So it will help us to move more swiftly.
I think in terms of actual site design, I actually really love the design of the website. I know this is a little bit of an unpopular opinion right now, but I feel like the modern look definitely highlights the work that the district is doing to kind of modernize our campuses. In terms of ownership of the site after those 5 years, this is a question for you, Ms. Kemp. Do you know if this is part of our contract where we own the site and then we just put it on our domain after that 5-year period, or is
Yes,
this something?
we own this information. This is district information.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We don't have public comment. Any other comments or questions with this? Is there any? And it looks like we are taking action. Are we taking action? Yes.
So I'll make a motion to adopt the district's 2024 long-range facilities plan.
I'll second that.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote. Student Board Member Hodges. Sorry, just keep tripping. Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Pratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
Thank you so much for all of your work. We really appreciated it.
Yeah,
Thank you. All right, next we'll move on to 11.9, consideration of approval of memorandum of understanding between the Measure J traffic congestion relief agency, traffics, and San Ramon Valley Unified School District regarding the expectations and responsibilities associated with the implementation of the traffic's student transportation service. And that's Director of Communications, Alana Israel Samuels.
Apologies. Oh, is that on? Yeah. I'm on. I didn't really have a presentation about this. It, I think, speaks for itself. One thing I do want to flag for everybody specifically is there are 2 new routes being offered this year by Traffics, one at Cal High and one at Coyote Creek Elementary. And so when you look at, and don't be fooled by the wording of circulation maps, because what it means is not circulation of the bus around town and routes. It means the circulation on our school site. And this is attached. And so when you look at the map there for Cal High and you look at the map for Coyote Creek, it does not yet account for an extra bus at each location. I wanted to just share with you what I was able to glean from the traffics administrator and specifically the city of San Ramon, since that's where these schools are. The Coyote Creek bus, they are still working through the exact location that will be best outside their campus to pair with the other bus that's there currently. And the city of San Ramon engineering staff, traffic staff, and the principal at Coyote Creek continue to work together to find that so it's ready for the new school year. And then for Cal High, again, the amazing staff at City of San Ramon and the engineering department have worked to determine that the bus will actually stop on the backside of Cal High across that little footbridge. And they've already spoken to the Contra Costa Sanitary District that has a building right there. If you've ever been there on, I think it's Mangoes and Ensenada, right? They're going to be able to to put that bus right there and have a red curb right in front of that property, which is just right at the back of school. So other than that, everything should be self-explanatory, but I'm here if you have any questions.
I like that solution with Cal High. It gets congested back there, but I think if they have the red curb and then And it kind of gives that bus a different escape plan in all of the traffic and congestion around Cal.
And it might make people drive better back there.
Yeah, yeah.
Cause it gets crazy back
Yes.
there.
Mhm.
All right, does anyone have any other questions or concerns? No?
I move approval on the MOU with traffics and the districts.
I'll second that.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Van Zee. Roll call vote, Student Board Member Hodges.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
Great. Thanks, Alana.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have, last we have 11.10, which was pulled from consent, the adoption of textbooks. So I know Jesse, you had pulled it and Debbie, if you could come up to answer any questions in case.
Yeah. So I'll just start with a couple of housekeeping items on it. I think as we discussed over the last, several board meetings, see that we might be moving more to consolidating book approvals instead of every board meeting to, a few times a year, a handful of times a year, which I still do like that. But I do think kind of a sustainability, at least for myself as a board member, one thing that might be helpful, and I know you can't necessarily take action on it just for me saying it here, but something that maybe we can discuss is with this level of books and the depth that I do want to do our due diligence on as board members going into this is perhaps, and what I'm trying to not create is another 200 pages that would go on here, but something that would be short synopsis that would, for me as a board member, as I'm kind of just doing my preliminary overview of these, to know a little bit what the book's about. And then if there's things like, hey, some controversial subject, almost like how Common Sense Media is built up, like, hey, what people should know, includes, violence, drugs, sex, etc. So that me as a board member, I can go, is this one I look into deeper or more? I don't know how we would actually want to do that. I'm not saying that what I just threw up right there is where it ends up, but it was just a little bit of a heavy lift, which I'm happy to do. That's my job as a board member. So maybe that can be a conversation that we have going forward if we're going to move more towards this model. The second one, which is also kind of a housekeeping item, is an American Marriage is listed twice on here, and I was wondering if there was a reason for that. It's listed as a grade 12 book as well as a all high school 9 through 12 book, and I didn't know, maybe it was two separate teachers requested it and it just got put on there twice.
Are you referring to the spreadsheet or
Uh,
the board report?
I think it would be the spreadsheet of the listing of all books kind of in the grid matrix. So it would be on page 593 of the packet.
Nice.
Or wait, sorry, no. 595 of the packet, and that's also listed on the next page, 596.
Okay, it shouldn't, it's okay. Thank you so much. So it should not be listed twice, so I apologize for that error.
I didn't
Yep.
know if it
Yeah,
needed to be
there would be
corrected
no
or not.
reason for that.
Okay, I mean, it didn't seem like it really was critical error. So my next question is on the book Some Buddies. So as I was reviewing this, and again, this is for it's being suggested as a read aloud book for grades TK through 5. So approximately 4-year-olds through 10-year-olds. As I got a chance to review this book, some things came up. Initially, when I was first looking at it, it looks like your standard, kids book, big pictures, a few words on each page. So I'm guessing geared more towards that TK through 2nd kind of age range, just knowing, kids of that age. And as I was going through it, I'm seeing, some of the, it seems on the outset like I wouldn't be even talking about it tonight. It talks about some buddies are big, some bodies are small, big guy and a small person. It talks about just the variance of our bodies. But then what kind of shocked me a little bit is there is a page that says some people choose to have their bodies changed. And as I looked at that, I looked closer at the illustration that's associated with that. And what it pictures on there is somebody who's had top surgery or a double mastectomy, breast removal. And to me, I think kind of regardless of where you fall on like how you personally feel about those things, I think that for kind of a book gravitating towards 4-year-olds to 7-year-olds, maybe that seems to be a pretty heavy topic to be discussing with kids in a classroom as a read aloud. Because you could say, well, some people choose to have their bodies change, but the picture does denote exactly what that is. It is having your breast removed, or going into that conversation of top surgery and bottom surgery, all of those things. And that is a very heavy topic where kids are just starting to understand their own bodies. And I don't know why we would put that in front of little kids.
So I hear you. But about a year and a half ago, when we really started talking a lot more about books than we ever have in the 13 years that I've been in the district, one of the things that I really promised myself I was going to do was really to keep almost like my judgment out of it, to be perfectly honest with you, because that's not my role, right? My role is to develop a process and follow that process. Part of that is a teacher or a principal or a group of teachers put this forward and based on their professional judgment felt it was appropriate for this age range. They did their due diligence in looking at various sources to assess the extent to which those other sources agreed. And I'm looking at one right now that did say the audience was lower elementary. So that is the process that at some point in time, various points in time, I have put forward to this board as the process we are using to determine whether or not we even bring a book here and then you decide to approve it or not.
Yeah.
And so while I, may understand what you're saying from a personal point of view, I had to decide a long time ago that my personal point of view was not something that I really needed to bring into this. My role is to develop a process. You put at some point in time your stamp of approval on that process. I do believe that for this book, that process was followed.
Yeah. And hear me so clearly. This is not any personal thing towards you. And I know that you have a process to follow, and that's your role and function here. So it's not me questioning you necessarily on why is this book in front of us.
Sure.
So what I will say though, as a board member, the concept of there's multiple names for it: gender affirming care, gender affirming surgery. It ultimately ends up as a result of removal of genitals and of breasts.
Yeah, that is.
I'm just going to jump in on one thing, though. I think this is a discussion you need to have with each other, because what's so important is you are the ones who are elected to make this decision. So we've brought to you the process that we followed. And if you say no, that is perfectly within your purview. But I think what's happening is we as staff are getting involved in the discussion. So we're going to take ourselves out of this. And Trustee Benzie, if I may suggest, this is a discussion to have just with the four of you at the table.
Okay, perfect. I totally fine to do it. I didn't know.
Yeah, and I'll start with just, so I did not see this book from the way you described it. It's a book with a lot of different bodies. Let's say 50 different bodies. One of those bodies is a body of a transgender person who had gender affirming care. They did not have their genitals cut off. They had gender affirming care. Top surgery, that was not bottom surgery. Those are two completely different things. I have a family member who has had top surgery. His body is a body that is loved, that he loves, that I love. And to show that in an image is not a bad thing. And it's not, and to say that that's going to cause conversation to be had. Is that going to cause conversation to be had that's going to be about cutting off genitals? Or is that going to be a conversation about, here's a person who looks like this, here's a person who looks like that? Like how does that then connect to
and
removing genitals?
And I want to be delicate here, because I in no means mean this to cross over to personal boundaries, but it does involve this topic. And so first and foremost, my hope is to care for you as a person, as a colleague. But I also have to discuss this as an elected official representing parents within this district, that this is the book references that, and it says some people choose to have their bodies changed. Now that can fall into top surgery or it can fall into bottom surgery. This kind of goes into our earlier point of my somewhat reluctance of there's a very big range of what some teachers look at as age appropriate. And I can respect that there is always going to be a range. And that's why I sometimes have a hard time with the explanation of, well, they'll use the professional judgment on age appropriateness, because I know some teachers that would never select this book and others that would. And I also know, there's people in our community that will have no problem with this book and others would. I just have a hard time as a board member going, if I'm serving the entire community, why am I forcing a wedge issue that's really going to animate some parents if they come home and say, yeah, in class, we learned that some people can change their bodies in this way. And it's hard to tell with young kids where those conversations are going to go, but that is the conversation that's being started. And I wonder, why is this a conversation that we're wanting to have with kids this young? I personally, I know there's many others that would support me, and I know there's people who disagree with me, but why are we doing this? It's a very young book, and it's a concept that they're being introduced to before even, sex ed. It's a pretty advanced concept in a very young, like the reading age of it, super young. The reading level, very age appropriate. The content, I disagree with the age appropriateness of it. And I just
I haven't seen the book. So is the book of that picture of a young child with top?
No, it's an adult, or I mean, it's all cartoons.
So in theory, it could be me having had a double mastectomy and not choosing to have implants put in and reconstructive surgery put in place.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rainbow umbrella over it. It's very clear where it's going.
So it could be a lesbian woman who's had a double.
Or a trans man, but it's choosing to change their bodies. When you have a double mastectomy because you're doing either prophylactic cancer surgery or reactive to a cancer diagnosis, that's, it's a little different. It's not what the book is. It's not what it's trying to go for. And I mean, I get where you're coming from. You could, determine it a bunch of ways. The intent of it is that, and that will be a conversation that will be had. And it's listed by, numerous pro LGBT groups as this is a great way to introduce transgenderism to a kid. So I have to take it at face value at that. And that's me. I have my personal views on what I would want for my children, but I also have to consider, what are we doing with our community what are the things that drive our community apart? And there's so many other ways, there's so many other books to describe, hey, there are different bodies where we can respect people that have all different looks without then kind of slipping in this wedge issue that I just go, this is a really young age book to be introducing. And I know that is a topic that ultimately will be discussed. I just question this is where we should be discussing it at 4 to 6 years old as a read aloud book that might be read to the entire class.
And in the scope of inclusivity, there are kids in our school district of that age who have parents and family members who have chosen to change their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of helping students to understand that there are all types of body types. This isn't a sex ed book. This is just a book about different body types.
And I understand that. And I think it leads itself into the conversations of students coming home. And not that every kid will, but there will be those conversations that happen. And I think my hope as a board member is that ultimately, for at least the majority of I know we can't avoid all controversial topics, and that's not really the scope of school. But I do think that there's like a gradual approach to it, and this one just feels so young, and it feels like a very it's a deep topic. I mean, and there's a lot of stuff coming out on this from the medical perspective, from the healthcare perspective, and there's a lot of stuff. Now, this is just a kid's book that shows a picture, so I don't want to conflate the topic. But for me, this is one that I, as a board member, go, there is so many other ways to introduce this to a kid who's just learning basic things right now. And we don't necessarily need, like, we can teach them how to respect everybody regardless of what they look like. But to go into this, that's a pretty big thing.
So, and again, I'll go to, this is a read aloud book when we were talking about the policy. And read aloud books are used in specific situations, specific classrooms, specific cohorts. So it wouldn't necessarily be a book that every student would have put in front of them, correct? I mean, that's kind of the assumption around read alouds.
But it could
And
be.
it, sure, yeah, it could be. I think, in trusting our teachers, they would, they would choose books that would fit with what reflecting the students in their classroom. So, this provides an opportunity for a teacher who perhaps something is coming up around body bullying and they want to, and I mean, I'm not a teacher, I'm just making up things as to why, but I could also see that again, if I'm looking at, different families, different types of bodies in those families, those types of things. And there may be a need for a book like this in a specific classroom with a specific cohort of students where, let's just role play it. Let's just say that a child has a parent who's transgender and there is another child in that class that is saying, why does your mommy look like a daddy or whatever, whatever that looks like. And then maybe that's that opportunity. Maybe that's too much. Maybe there's already a parent in that classroom that's like, I'm really uncomfortable with the fact that there's this student that has this parent who's transgender. That teacher may know that those dynamics are happening, and then there might be an opportunity for conversation at the parent level. Again, these are all just me making up how would this book be used.
Yeah.
I don't think that, that this book would intentionally be used to open up that conversation around
Well, and that's the thing.
gender affirming
Yeah.
care.
And
For a
I
5-year-old.
I appreciate your examples of that, because I think that would be kind of considering the best case use of the book. But we as board members, after it leaves this vote, we don't have a say in that. It will be a board approved book that's going to be used however it's decided to
And
be used.
with the trust of our educated staff and the expertise of our staff.
Well, exactly. And it's things like this that I go, this will erode trust for some parents, for some teachers. Because if it's read aloud, I mean, we've got 18 to 22 kids in these lower grade classrooms. You're gonna run into some kids and some parents that are like, that is not something I want on my kid's radar right now. Like, even if it was, a certain amount of, like, there's going to be a huge catchment for a read aloud book like that. And there might be some instances where you read through the book, like kind of go into the best case scenario, and it's not really even, it's just like, it's another page in the book. There could be other ones where it's discussed and then there's conversations later that are then being dealt with. For me, I'm trying to think of ways that, like, if there's other ways to approach how to respect people from, all walks of life, all shapes, colors, and sizes, which is a great thing that we should be doing. There's other ways to achieve that end goal. And, and that is something that to me, this is a bridge too far to be introducing that level of complexity for a kid who's already on a very, on their psychological development. That is a very early time to introduce the concept of a body change. Now, there might be times where parents, right, have to have that conversation with their kids, or there's certain instances. That's where I personally default to. That belongs kind of more in the parent or the teacher communicating directly with those parents. Hey, we noticed this. Your kid was having some questions about, so-and-so's, mom or dad or moms or whatever. And this is what we would suggest you could maybe have a conversation with, because we just don't want it. We want this classroom to be safe for everybody. This is the intent of what I'm looking at as a board member, is this is going to be read aloud to all students in a class, and maybe multiple classes. And will, for this point out, if approved, it could have an application this year, but we don't know what that is in 5 years or what it is. I mean, I've seen that with some of these other books that we've discussed. It might have just been, a single classroom, but these things tend to stay there. And be used, however it's decided. And I do trust I do trust our teachers and our educators. I personally have never ran into a teacher myself where I don't have that level of trust. But if that happened to my kid, you know, and I had to have that conversation when I wasn't ready, I would feel an erosion of trust. And so that's what I'm trying to avoid with that. And I think the topic, me personally, I think the topic's way too advanced for a book of this, you know, this very young age approach. So, I mean, that's my personal opinion. I know it doesn't have to be shared, but I'm doing my duty to share what I feel represents a portion of our community.
So in my, first of all, I totally respect that your opinion and that how you feel. I think you made that very clear and I appreciate that. In my almost 4 years on the board, I haven't had the experience of having any parent come forward to me to say that they objected to a book or the content of a book or that their child has been damaged by a book. I understand that that happens. Obviously, you've had a few of those, but the world is quite a different place than it was when I was in school, even when my daughter, who's, you know, in her 30s now, was in school. And I think that the reason why some of these things are in the books is because this is the way the world is now. And in order to try to teach and develop empathy in our children for other people, it has to start early. And I know it seems like very early, but I think it's really important because we've been through the time, especially around LGBTQ, where there was so much persecution and not understanding and intolerance and violence that I think what we're trying to do is instill that in our young people. And I do trust our educators that if they felt that that book isn't appropriate, that they wouldn't use it, or if there was a specific need for it, that they would have the latitude to be able to do that. I don't think it's so catastrophic that if I had a child that age and they came home and asked me about that, I wouldn't have a problem talking about that and telling them what I would feel would be age appropriate about it, because these are the people that live in the world around you. And it's important to understand all. So that's why I don't view it as being necessarily offensive or somehow damaging to them, as long as it's presented in a constructive way. So that's just my experience.
All right, so I don't know, do we want to make a motion on this list? Do we want to, how do we want to move forward? Did you have any other questions about other books or?
No, that was the main one that jumped out to me as, yeah, not something that I would approve.
Okay, so we could make a motion. Well, I can't make any motion. Can I make a recommendation for a motion? Okay. So we could make a motion for all books minus the book and then pull that book and then do a second motion for that book to approve that single book and then to approve the list. Can we do that? Is that something that you agree with, or does anyone have any other ideas for how to navigate this approval process when we have a list of books and there's a concern about a single book? Yes, no, yeah, I know. Well, and we do. So let's just take comments and then we'll go from there. Okay, sorry about that, Mr. Arata. We have one comment card for Mike Arata, and this will be the last chance for comments for anyone else.
I'd recommend that the parents watching help take small kids out of the room that's not going to read from one of the books up for adoption. See, it's pornographic. With your latest set of textbook adoptions, you're expanding a sorted record of allowing your teacher unionists to use inappropriate texts in their classrooms. And in the case of high school adoptions, pornographic texts. Along with the direct transgender push of some bodies, another book recommended, and this is for younger kids, is Red, a Cran's Story. It's about a blue crayon that's mistakenly labeled as red. Corby Saunders' program of what she calls queering the classroom considers the book to be a means of providing what she calls trans representation, her words, for read-alouds to captive audiences of what responsible adults would recognize as vulnerably impressionable children in elementary grades. A Saunders follow-up email then advised other teachers that sudden self-identification as transgender status by even transition kindergartners is to be concealed from parents, and that has become the official district policy in a district which claims that parents are its partners. There are several pornographic texts also in this list among the high school selections that you're adopting this evening. One of them is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. The public should be made aware of some of the book's sleazy content. Due to time limits, I'll read just one passage from the book. Quote, "This one couple, whom I was told later were very popular and in love, stumbled into my room. They closed the door and started kissing. After a few minutes, the boy's hand went up the girl's shirt and she started protesting. 'Come on, Dave, the kid's in here.' After a few minutes, she stopped protesting and he pulled her shirt off and she had a white bra on with lace. Pretty soon, he took off the bra and started to kiss her breasts. And then he put his hand down her pants and she started moaning. I think they were both very drunk. He reached to take off her pants, but she started crying really hard. So he reached for his own. He pulled his pants and underwear down to his knees. 'Please, Dave, no,' she said. But the boy just talked soft to her then, and she grabbed his penis with her hands and started moving it. After a few minutes, the boy pushed the girl's head down and she started to kiss his penis. Finally, she stopped crying because he put his penis in her mouth. And I don't think you can cry in that position." And so on. In a school district with sensible and responsible board members, this grossly inappropriate book would be rejected. But sensible and responsible are not descriptors which fit this board's majority. That's unfortunate. So you'll adopt it anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Arata. We also have a comment card from Lorinda Eshon. I'm saying your name wrong.
I want to respond to you, Jesse. I have grandchildren in the public schools and I've watched them. The oldest is in 4th grade now. And there are 3 of them. And when these topics of like gay pride come up, or someone has 2 moms, if you look at it from an adult perspective, if you're looking at that book you've just described from your adult perspective with your knowledge and ideas about transgenderism, that's a different take than a 1st grader or a 2nd grader or a 3rd grader. When my grandchildren hear about someone with 2 moms, they don't stop and think about lesbian sex. I mean, sex is not part of their experience. They just say, "Oh, 2 moms, that's cool." If they see, we have friends who are transgender. When they see a transgender person, I mean, they know something is a little different, right? And now they see in a book, "Oh, that's what Billy's dad, I mean, that looks like Billy's dad." They don't think about the surgery. I mean, that's outside of their understanding of the world. So if we put our adult perspective on these books, I think we're distorting the way a child is experiencing it. And our teachers and librarians are trained to know what the child is experiencing. And I think it's really important to make that distinction. We cannot bring our attitudes about these things and expect a child to react in the same way, because they won't. And if we scare the children by putting our information onto it and distorting their experience of it, we're not serving them well. So I really think it's important to think of it from the child's perspective, I don't know if a child's gonna rush home and say, Mom, Dad, what's this transgenderism? I just saw a picture or it came up that you can change your body. Where are they talking about? A second, third, fourth grader, that doesn't make sense to them to even engage you in a conversation like that. Unless your child is very, very precocious. And I think your children are regular children like my grandchildren are. It's just outside of their experience. They're not going to be looking at it in that same way. They're not going to be shocked by it. It's just part of life. And I think that's what Laura was suggesting. These are people who are in our lives, in our community. And we want our children to see them that way. And we want to do our children the service of allowing them to live in the world as it is.
Thank you, Lorinda.
And,
Any
and I'll just respond to that because, it was directed towards me. I think that a lot of people wouldn't disagree with what you said. And that's where I say that is the prerogative of the parent. Parents have a right and a responsibility to raise their kids in such a fashion that they see is best fit for them. And that responsibility is not to be punted and should not be punted to the teacher or to the community, unless they choose to do so. And some people choose to do that and others won't. But again, that's their right and responsibility to do that. While some would not disagree with anything that you said, others would, and others would say, I actually want to, there is something to be said for preserving innocence of children too, because there's a lot coming at them in this world. And, this is just something that I believe that there is a lot of parents that would object to this being put on a kid's radar, and it will then therefore be divisive. And my goal as a trustee is, what can we do that achieves the maximum result with also the least division? And this would be a very heavily dividing topic to bring in my opinion. So, and I think to Mr. Arata's point, there were so many books on here. I thought I caught the one, but some of the things that were read, it's interesting. I think I passed over that book because I saw the movie and I didn't see that in the movie. So shame on me. But there might be a couple. I'm okay with approving a majority of these, but there might be some that there's one that I know already kind of how I'm going to vote on, and there might be a few more that I'd want to look into more just because it was raised in public comment. Just me personally. And
okay. So, I do want to say that I agree, just to response to your comment about Lorinda's comment, that I agree that as a parent, I certainly love the idea of controlling everything that my child is exposed to. That sounded a little passive aggressive, and I apologize. I should have stopped myself before I said that. But we are trustees of a public institution, public educational institution, and so to take the morals of individuals of certain perspectives and apply that to a public institution, to me, doesn't quite make sense. I also understand that that there's ways for for parents to kind of control what's being taught in a public education classroom by not exposing their child to that, by opting out, those types of things. That's not what we're in the business of doing when it comes to books. I think that, anyway, I'm talking in circles. It's a public institution. So
and I hear you on that. And on the same hand, I'm elected by people who are choosing me to represent them and their voice up here. And so I am doing my due diligence in doing that. And we also do have policies within our district that say we will not interfere with the religious development of a child, and this would.
I disagree with that, but that's okay.
It
so
would.
So maybe I think we just approved a policy about how books are selected, and now we have an action item about a list of books that have been actually sitting in a stack for months and months and months. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to just jump in as a matter of organization, just because I think it's really important to be this transparent. The policy you passed tonight would mean that this book will not be coming to you in the future. Debbie was following the process that was in practice before. I want to be very clear so that nobody thinks that there was something untoward that happened. The policy you passed tonight would suggest that if it is a read aloud, it is not within the board's approval, that the teacher would follow that rubric and be sensitive to who they serve in their classroom. So as much as it's here before you because we were following the old practice, and you should, I think, finish the job this evening to vote as you see fit. I don't want you to be surprised that you will not see this again under what you passed previously. So I just think that's important for you to know.
Now, wouldn't this also fall into the language in there about being sensitive to age appropriateness and stuff like that too? And that sensitive subjects would be taken into consideration?
What that policy states is that if a parent wishes to engage their teacher or their principal about some of the sensitivities, that is invited. But that a teacher has to know who they're serving. So if we're talking about a first grade classroom, if a teacher is going to pick that book from the read aloud, our expectation is there is an intention behind that. And if that is challenged, we wouldn't necessarily lack trust in that teacher, but we would have a conversation. Help us understand why you chose this text, not in a negative way, but in order for us to mediate. And our hopeful answer would be, I'm serving 20 kids. This emerged at recess. This conversation happened, and I need to address it because if we're going to create an inclusive environment, I've got 20 kids with 20 different family and experiential histories, and something emerged. But I just want to be clear. I don't want to get involved in the debate. The policy you passed would suggest that we're not bringing read alouds here anymore. So I just want
So
you-
a kind of a devil's advocate question here. If we just did not take action on this list, they wouldn't not be approved. They would just be in the pile for the new process. And a teacher would, or I'm asking a question, would that be the case?
For the read alouds only,
the
yes,
read
but
alouds.
not for the.
And,
Yes, you're
and I see that a little bit as a distinction without much of a difference, because before our previous policy did allow for a teacher to grab one book and read it to an entire classroom with no board approval. So I really don't see there's a difference between this specific topic and before. It's just that they want, it to be codified into curriculum.
I
So,
don't understand that last
under our previous policy, would you say it's true or not true? It's one book and it would be read to a portion of a classroom, entire classroom. There was nothing in our previous policy that would have prevented that.
We started, again, now we're going backwards. So I'm going to stop and simply say, we started a practice however long ago that was not in policy. And this whole discussion is trying to clarify exactly what this board is going to expect going forward. In my last two meetings, I have to state this. Our team has got to get out from underneath this. That is what I'm asking of you. However you vote is fine, because that is what you are elected to do. But the only reason I asserted earlier, this can't be a staff conversation anymore. There's a process in place. We followed the process. In the future, we won't even bring this forward because it's not part of the policy that you just passed. If you hear concerns from the community, again, there's a strategy that we'll follow. If you want to change your policy because it's not working for you 6 months from now, you have every right to do that. But I just needed to assert that next year, you're not going to see this and you're not going to have this conversation. My suggestion would be, and I don't think this is all that easy to do on the floor, is there's a number of texts in that that's in front of you that does need your approval based upon old policy and new policy. So again, I'll let you decide how you want to navigate that, but I just wanted to be clear about that.
Well, and I want to ask a clarifying question on that, because my understanding is that there were some read aloud books that have and were permitted to be used for the same flexibility that we were talking about before, that were not board approved books. And the reason why we didn't include it on there is that would be adding a further encumbrance to the teacher in the classroom.
What we are saying, no, that's not what we're saying. Things got muddy and things got messy. And when things got really politically tense, we probably made a difficult decision to bring everything to you. The unintended consequence of that is what you're experiencing. So no, it was not that there was a broken front. And what this whole process has been attempting to do is to be absolutely clear what you expect, absolutely clear what the process is, absolutely clear when parents are struggling what they need to do, so that we don't have this kind of conversation every single month. That's what the muddy history has caused. So to answer your question, before, however many years ago, the board would not necessarily see it at all. When things became more intense, we thought we better just bring them all. And I think I was part of that decision, and we brought like 55 books 3 years ago. Many of them wouldn't have been brought forward many years before that. And now the unintended consequence is we are starting to get into a place where this discussion continuously happens at this table. The policy you passed says we're bringing these books to you, novels and other texts that are assigned. All else we're not bringing to you. And that expectation of what educators will do is in place. So again, we used old practice because you hadn't had tonight's discussion, which is why Debbie did exactly what she's done in the past on my direction. And I apologize that that's caused additional issue. Again, the only reason I jumped in is because I realized this conversation based upon what you just decided won't happen next year. And I don't want anyone to expect it in light of the policy that's been passed. So that's the only thing I wanted to clarify.
And I'll say that my understanding as a trustee, by reading our policy, that was not in our policy. And whether or not there was things happening behind the scenes, the intention was to clear that up. And what I heard in the presentation on the update to 6161.1 was that as we looked into the read alouds, we determined that that would be too much of an encumbrance on teachers. Therefore, we couldn't add it. But there was no explanation that like that was our current practice and now you're actually taking that off. So that's what I'm having a little bit of
But
an
if I
issue with
could
what
add-
you're saying, Dr.
I think if I may before Debbie, this is what we spent a lot of time at the workshop. It's not in policy, it was in practice, and the new policy was going to clarify exactly what you expected. So I'm simply clarifying. Going forward under the new policy, we will not be bringing read alouds to this table for approval. That is as clear as I can make it.
Okay, so I listened to all stakeholders around these issues. And as I said before, I haven't heard a lot of negative, I'll just coin it as negative around the books. I am not interested in trying to find ways to make things less divisive if it's at the cost of what I think is the best for our students. So in this case, I would like to call for a vote on this, and everybody can vote their conscience. But to try to have this debate over and over again, I don't think is serving anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we put books on trial on this dais, and it's, I don't know, it feels like we're just spinning in circles. And when we talk about the coming to the approval of the policy 6161, that was it was a long time coming. It was a lot of discussion, a lot of due diligence, a lot of research, a lot of fact finding and understanding finding, right? And now we're spinning again. We're still spinning again. So I don't know. I think we need to take action.
Well, I would make a motion to approve the list of books as submitted. If there's a second, great. If there's not, then
I do have a question. Would that be including the books for grades 6 through 12 as well?
yes.
Thank you.
Shelley's motion.
The motion was made by Board Member Clark and seconded by Board Member Hurd. Roll call vote. Student Board Member Hodges.
I vote aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
No.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 3-1.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, board. Travis. All right, so Next, we we don't have any informational items. So now we recess the meeting of the Board of Education. And we convene a meeting of the San Ramon Valley Unified School District Joint Powers Financing Authority. I'm doing that a lot tonight. And then we have 15 agenda approval. So may I have a motion to accept the agenda for the JP?
So it's on there as a consent agenda, but there's something on the consent agenda I would like to make a comment about.
Okay.
So there's only two things on the agenda. Can I just make a comment about it, or should I actually remove it from consent?
I think you're fine, given.
So as I look at the one where it's about choosing affirming the officers of the joint power, the JPA, it seems like this action belongs at our regular organization meeting, and maybe it just got missed. And so I think it's fine to vote for it tonight, but I would just like to put a little tickler in that next December, we put it there. Does that make sense?
It does.
And then now I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda of the JPA.
Second.
The motion was made by Board Member Hurd and seconded by Board Member Clark. Roll call vote. Student Board Member Hodges.
Aye.
Board Member Hurd.
Aye.
Board Member Van Zee.
Aye.
Board Member Clark.
Aye.
Board Member Bratt.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0.
Great, thanks. Now I will gavel out of our JPA meeting and then gavel back into the San Ramon Valley Unified School District meeting. I know it's, oh, sorry. So now we are at administrative matters. So board reports. And I don't know if Travis, I'm sure you haven't planned a report, but if you want to take a minute to say anything, you haven't, just as a report out.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to wing this. So I guess to give a bit of a report out, I can talk about what I'm hoping to do this year and accomplish in the student board member position. I'm really excited because our student senate for this next year has a fantastic group of individuals, and I'm really excited to work with our senate chair as well. I know that we have a lot of great things in store, and what I'm mainly hoping to do is really tighten that connection between students and the student board member. I want to make it as democratic as possible, and also maybe even look at ways that we can have our school district committees working with the student senate and trying to bridge them together. Furthermore, I'd also like to maybe come up with a system for sending out video updates where I'm updating each of the different school sites on what I'm doing and we're doing as a board to make their lives and their educational experience better. I think that'd be a really hands-on way to increase that connection. I went around campus the other day at my high school, Monte Vista, and I interviewed students, and 90% of kids didn't even know that they were represented on the school board. So I think that is, there's a lot of progress to be made in strengthening that connection, but I'm really excited for what we as a board can do this year to make that happen.
Great. Thank you so much. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So the day after our last board meeting, I got to attend the Generation Citizen Civics Day, and several other board members and staff members did as well. And it was just a fantastic event, and they organized it really nicely. And it was really great to see our students in action, speaking up and making a difference. The following weekend, I attended the CSBA Board of Directors and Delegate Assembly meeting, and Susanna joined me for the first time on the Delegate Assembly. Big takeaway there was CSBA's adamant staunch. They're like defenders of Prop 98. That was even in our budget report. They kind of led the charge on saying no to the governor's maneuver, and we were delighted that CTA joined in, because when CTA speaks up, all of a sudden stuff starts to happen. CSBA still has not seen the details of whatever they agreed to, so they're still like cautiously optimistic, but waiting judgment. And then on that front, when I came back, I participated in 2 legislator Zoom meetings. We didn't actually get to meet with the legislators, but they're key staff people. Reiterating, it was Senator Glazier and Assembly Member Bonta over in Alameda, urging them to hold fast on Prop 98. And the main thing being that while the maneuver would make the coming year a little easier, it would make the out years worse. And I really think, especially as trustees, we have to pay attention to the long game. And I'm really glad that CTA is joining us in that view. We all were at the retirement celebration, and I just want to thank Melanie and her whole team because the change in that, making it its own event and holding it at a different place was so nice. And I really hope we'll continue to do it that way again. And it was just executed beautifully. That night, I also got to go to the Monte Vista Capstone Symposium. I'm not sure if everyone was invited to that, but again, what an amazing opportunity to see our stellar students up in front of individuals, talking about their work, showing their data, you know, again, like a science fair kind of setup, but it was about their capstone projects. And oh my gosh, they were amazing. And their teacher was amazing. He stayed till the end and he was talking to everybody. And it was just a really great example of deep learning for sure. Then we all got to do graduations. I got to do Reach the week before, and then Diablo Vista, Gale Ranch, and Venture. And I just have to give a plug for the Venture graduation. Christine and Melanie were there with me as well as John, and talk about the most spirited, feel the joy kind of activity. There was this one young lady that John was really worried she was gonna jump right off the stage in her enthusiastic dancing about her achievement, but it was amazing. And then I think I already talked about N100, so that's everything. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll second that on my board report that the graduations were just a phenomenal experience. I look forward to it every year, although the weather I wasn't super looking forward to. You know, lost a couple pounds of water weight each night, but just had a great time. I think I'm just continuously blown away by the students and the speeches. And I got to attend Monte Vista High School graduation, and the speeches were just so phenomenally done. I think the whole night was very special. So I had a great time doing that. And then I think in between this meeting and the last meeting, there's a few other things I've done. Was the Sermo Valley PTA breakfast meeting also in between here and there, or was that before? Okay. So I know we all attended that and had a great time doing that, and I'll let somebody else speak to more detail on that too. I've got a few other ones. Attended the Street Smarts Advisory Committee, and we talked about kind of upcoming events for the year, and Alana and I were able to attend that together. There's going to be kind of some turnover and a new guard coming in as people retire. So just thankful for their service that they've really dedicated to our students in our community for a long period of time. Was able to visit with Dr. Malloy, myself, see Congressman Mark DeSaulnier at the Monte Vista High School. Travis, you were there, right? You were in the audience as well too. Another great conversation where it's just always fun having conversations with the high school students on everything that they're going through, obstacles they're facing, things that they see that are successes within our school. It's always a great opportunity for me as a board member to just understand and learn more, and also kind of dive into what's the student level of how you guys are experiencing our schools. So always appreciate doing that. And then was also able to visit Golden View. So lots of fun things, and I'm sure everybody's excited for the summer. So happy summer, everybody, except for those in summer school.
So I visited Green Valley Elementary and Walt Disney, and then I came back to Walt Disney to do the water walk, which was really, I didn't make it very far. The kids were barefooted. Basically, the water walk is sort of showing the kids what the kids in Africa have to do to carry water on their head for miles in order to have water, period. And so they went around the track with water on their head, and boy, that's really hard work. So Laura was there with me, and I think we made it one lap, but we tried. Anyway, it was really a great exercise for the kids. I attended the swearing in ceremony on the Danville Green of our students who have signed up to enlist in the military to defend our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I wanted to acknowledge them tonight. It's a huge commitment that they're making, and I think it deserves acknowledgement. Going into the United States Marine Corps, Jordan Ball from California High School, Karina Canada from California High School, Luke Boddington from San Ramon Valley High School, Hemming Sun from Monte Vista High School and Noah Nara from San Ramon Valley High School. Going into the United States Navy, Elise Cordosa from California High School, Aiden McHale from San Ramon Valley High School. There were some other schools there that also had students who had signed up in for the military. I just wanted to acknowledge them. I also was a Generation Citizen, and the kids are amazing, and they come up with all these amazing solutions to things. And a lot of them had to do with school and stress and too many AP classes and all of that. And I think after seeing them, that's where we're going to get the change in culture if it comes from them. See, they see it as an issue and they can talk to each other about it. We just have to get some of the parents on board. I attended the PTA recognition breakfast and got completely blindsided with a service award, which was so lovely and so nice. Completely, I walked in there and my husband was there. I'm like, what are you doing here? Anyway, that was really, really nice for that the PTA did that. I really, really appreciate it. We were all at the retirement celebration. That was great. And of course, graduations and promotions are the best part of the year. They remind me of why I do what I do. And it's just such a privilege to be able to hand a diploma or a certificate to a student and say, congratulations, good job. It's just really, really fulfilling. Also attended the Serbia Day of the Teacher event at Hazy Barbecue, and we had a little fun and and discussion and fellowship, and that was really great. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I did it pretty much all of the same things everyone else did. I got to be at Doherty Valley High School and Delamigo transition. And you know, it's graduation is the best. You know, I think I'd made some post about, you know, it's just soaking in all that joy. It's just, and that sense of accomplishment, you know, you get to, I don't know, it's very fulfilling and very wonderful. And then I was at the Charlottewood promotion, LCAP meeting, traffics meeting, retirement reception. And I think, oh, and then the PTA recognition breakfast. And I think congratulations, if I'm misremembering, congratulations are in order for both Shelley and John for accolades that they received, and Christine, I apologize. So it was a wonderful event for everyone involved. So, and all the volunteers and everyone that that won awards. And then I just want to, you know, it's June, and I want to just say, wish a happy Pride. I mean, you know, I'm proud, and I think it's important for us to remember that it wasn't that long ago, whether it was the AIDS pandemic or it was Matthew Shepard or the hallways in my school, where you just couldn't be different. You just, you know, you just weren't allowed, you know, you just were not allowed. And seeing what's, you know, what it looks like in our kids' classrooms, in the halls in our kids' schools, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our towns, on this dais. I mean, I think it's just, you know, it's just something that we should all be proud of. And so I'm proud of our district. I'm proud of our community. I'm proud of our country. I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of my friends. I'm proud of all of us. And I just think, you know, it's important for us to celebrate that and acknowledge that. So thank you. So that's my report. So, oh, so I get to hit the gavel again. So meeting adjourned.